Hello, my sleepy cuties. It's time to rest, to let the busy world grow quiet, and to give yourself permission to drift away. Tonight, I'll tell you a story. Not just any story, but one filled with curiosity, whispers, and the mystery of places half forgotten. Rain tapped against the windows of the old house, soft and steady, filling the rooms with a sleepy rhythm. The sky was gray, the garden dark with dripping leaves, and the air inside the house smelled faintly of dust and old wood. Coraline pressed her nose to the cold glass, watching the drops chase each other down in winding paths. Behind her, the sound of her father's typing never stopped, a steady clicking like raindrops made of metal. Her mother moved from box to box, muttering to herself, stacking papers, setting things down, only to pick them up again. Coraline sighed. They were always busy, always too distracted to notice. She wandered through the halls, her footsteps soft against the wooden floor. She dragged her fingers along the walls, feeling every groove and ripple beneath the faded wallpaper. It was smooth at first, but then, near the drawing room, her hand caught on something. She paused. The wallpaper bubbled there, lifting ever so slightly from the wall. Curious, Coraline pushed the heavy chair aside, the wood groaning against the floorboards as though it disliked being moved. Behind it, she found the strange patch of wallpaper again, and beneath the paper, the faint outline of a shape. A door. Small, square, almost hidden. Coraline pressed her palm against it and felt the hardness beneath the wallpaper. Wood. Cold, solid, real. "Mother," she called. "There's a door here." Her mother, busy stacking dishes, barely glanced up. "It's nothing," she said. "Just a little door. It doesn't go anywhere. Old houses have those." "But," Coraline started. "No buts," her mother interrupted gently. "Be careful. Don't get into trouble." And that was that. Her mother went back to her work, as if the tiny door didn't matter at all. But Coraline couldn't forget it. Later, when no one was looking, she began to search. In a drawer filled with papers, she found a small iron key. It was old and heavy, the kind of key that belonged to something forgotten. She held it tightly, turning it over in her hand. The sharp teeth, the cool metal, the weight of it, it all felt right. She knew it belonged to the little door. The house had given her a clue, and she was ready to follow it. She returned to the drawing room. The chair still stood pushed aside. The faint outline of the door waited beneath the wallpaper. Coraline peeled the paper back carefully. It tore with a slow, whispering sound, curling away to reveal the wooden frame of the tiny door. Dark wood, old scratches. A small lock that gleamed faintly as though it had been waiting all along. She knelt before it, the key cold in her hand. For a long moment she only stared. The house was silent around her. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. She leaned forward, her breath catching, her heart fluttering like a moth's wings. She felt that opening this door would change everything. She slid the key into the lock, and the little door waited. The iron key slid smoothly into the lock. Coraline turned it with a slow, careful twist, and the mechanism clicked open with a sound so soft it was almost like a sigh. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the small handle. The wood was cool beneath her fingers, and the silence of the house pressed in close around her. She pulled. The little door creaked as it swung open. Coraline leaned forward eagerly, her eyes wide, but instead of a passageway, there was only a wall of gray bricks stacked tightly together. They filled the doorway completely, rough and unmoving. Her breath caught in disappointment. So it was true. Her mother had been right. The little door led nowhere at all. She reached out to touch the bricks, half expecting them to crumble under her fingers. But they were solid, firm, and cold. She pressed her palm against them, then knocked lightly with her knuckles. The sound was dull, hollow, as if the wall was not as thick as it seemed. She frowned. Why would anyone build a door that opened onto nothing? Why hide it behind wallpaper, only to seal it shut? Coraline sat back on her heels, staring at the bricked passage. She ran her hand along the edge of the tiny door frame, tracing its scratches, wondering what stories it might hold. The lock, the key, the sealed bricks, it all felt deliberate, as though someone had gone to great effort to hide something away. She shut the door softly and turned the key again until she heard the faint click of the lock. The handle felt heavier now, as if it knew it held back secrets she couldn't yet reach. Coraline replaced the chair against the wall, though not all the way. She left it just slightly aside so the tiny door could still breathe, so she could return whenever she wished. That night, as she lay in bed listening to the rain tap against her window, she couldn't stop thinking about it. The little door, the wall of bricks, the strange silence that had filled the room when she unlocked it. The image stayed with her, even as her eyes drifted closed. She dreamed of dark hallways stretching on forever, lined with tiny doors. She dreamed of keys, hundreds of them, clinking together like bells. And somewhere far away in the dream, she thought she saw a light glowing faintly through cracks in the bricks, as though something waited on the other side. When morning came, the house seemed the same as always, but Coraline knew it wasn't. Not anymore. The little door had been found. And though it seemed blocked, she felt certain it was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The little door stayed in Coraline's mind all through the day. Even as she wandered the garden or trailed her fingers along the stair rails, she could feel the weight of the iron key in her pocket, as if it wanted her to return. She did, again and again. Sometimes she crept into the drawing room just to kneel before the door, to touch the handle, to press her ear against the wood. Behind it she heard nothing. No scratching, no whispering, no movement at all. Only silence. And always when she turned the key and opened it, the bricks stood waiting cold, gray, and unbroken. It should have ended there. But Coraline could not forget the door or the strange feeling she had when she first touched it, as if it were holding its breath. That night, as the house grew quiet and her parents drifted into their work and then into sleep, Coraline lay awake in her room. The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside still and heavy. She rolled over, staring into the darkness. Something tugged at her, a whisper, soft and steady, calling her back to the drawing room. She slipped from her bed, her bare feet cool against the wooden floor. The house creaked gently as if it knew she was moving through it. Down the hallway, past the tall windows, into the drawing room. The chair was still pushed slightly aside. The little door waited. She crouched and slid the key into the lock. Click. The door opened. But this time there were no bricks. Instead, the tunnel yawned before her, stretching away into shadows. Its walls curved like the inside of a throat, lined with strange, soft, gray shapes that shimmered faintly into the dim light. The air smelled different, not dusty and closed like before, but alive, as though it carried a faint breeze. Coraline leaned closer, her eyes wide. The tunnel seemed to breathe. She thought she heard something, faint and far away, a hum, a sigh, or maybe even her name. She hesitated. Her fingers tightened on the handle of the little door. Part of her wanted to close it quickly, to turn the key and pretend she had never seen the tunnel at all. But another part, stronger, louder, wanted to know what lay at the end. The golden glow deep within flickered, warm and inviting. Coraline's heart beat faster. The tunnel waited. She took one step inside. Coraline stepped into the tunnel. At once the air changed. Behind her, the drawing room fell silent, as though the house itself were holding its breath. Ahead, the tunnel curved away into darkness, its walls faintly glowing, gray and soft like fabric stretched too tightly. The ground beneath her feet was cool and uneven. When she pressed her hand against the side, it gave slightly, almost like damp cloth, before springing back into shape. She drew her hand away quickly. The tunnel stretched on, though it could not have been very long. The old house wasn't that big, and yet the space inside seemed endless. Her footsteps echoed strangely, bouncing back to her ears in whispers that didn't sound entirely like her own. Coraline slowed. She thought she heard something moving with her, not footsteps exactly, but a faint sound like the brushing of fabric or the soft sigh of someone breathing very close. She paused. The tunnel paused too. Her heart fluttered, but she took another step, then another. The whispers returned, and with them came a faint hum, soft and steady, like a tune carried on the air. It wrapped around her, both soothing and unsettling at once. She could see the glow now, a golden light far at the end, spilling gently into the darkness. Her curiosity pulled her forward. The tunnel seemed to narrow as she walked, the ceiling dipping lower, the walls closing in closer. Coraline ducked her head, pressing on. Sometimes the light flickered, and when it dimmed, the shadows around her seemed to move, shifting in the corners of her eyes. She glanced back quickly, but behind her there was only the small, square outline of the door, already so far away it looked tiny. She didn't want to turn back, not yet. The glow ahead promised something waiting for her, something more than an old bricked-up wall or a forgotten corner of the house. Finally, the tunnel widened. The glow spilled brighter now, painting her hands and face in gold. She quickened her pace, her breath catching in her chest. With one last step, Coraline reached the end. She blinked. It was her house. The drawing room, just as she knew it, but different. Brighter, richer. Every color sharper, every shadow softer. The lamps glowed without flicker. The walls seemed freshly painted, their patterns alive with detail. The air smelled sweeter, touched with warmth and the faint scent of flowers. Everything here was familiar, and yet it wasn't. Coraline stepped out of the tunnel and into this other room. Behind her, the little door clicked softly as though closing itself, though she had not touched it. She turned slowly, her eyes wide, her breath shallow. The house was hers, but not hers. And in the doorway ahead, someone waited. Coraline stood very still, her eyes adjusting to the golden glow of the room. The furniture looked the same as in her own house, but brighter, newer, and arranged with care, as though someone had been waiting for her to arrive. The table gleamed as if freshly polished. A fire flickered gently in the grate, casting a warm, steady glow. And then she saw her. Standing in the doorway, tall and smiling, was a woman who looked almost like her mother. Her hair was the same color, her clothes neat and familiar. Her smile stretched wide, too wide, though her lips curved in a way that seemed welcoming. But it was her eyes that caught Coraline's breath. They were not eyes at all. They were buttons. Shiny black buttons sewn neatly where eyes should have been. They caught the firelight and reflected it back, dark and gleaming. "Welcome, Coraline," the woman said, her voice smooth and warm, like velvet wrapping around her name. "We've been waiting for you." Coraline's heart gave a quick, nervous beat. She took a step back without meaning to. The woman tilted her head, the button eyes glinting. "Oh, don't be frightened. You're home now. Your real home." Her voice carried a softness that tugged at Coraline, both comforting and strange. The woman stepped closer. "You must be hungry, my dear. I've made you something special." From behind her came the smell of something rich and delicious: roasted chicken, warm bread, melted butter, chocolate cake. The scents drifted toward Coraline, tempting her, wrapping around her like invisible arms. Her stomach gave a small growl. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until now. The woman's smile widened. "Come along. Sit at the table. Everything is ready, just for you." Coraline hesitated, staring at the button eyes. They seemed to follow her every movement, catching her thoughts, drinking them in. Yet the warmth of the fire, the sweetness of the air, and the promise of food pulled her forward. She followed the woman to the kitchen. The kitchen was glowing. Pots and pans shone like silver. The counters gleamed. The table was set with steaming dishes that seemed too perfect to be real. Golden light poured from the lamp, soft and steady. Coraline sat down carefully. The woman, the other mother, Coraline thought suddenly, though she didn't know why, placed a plate before her and folded her hands neatly, watching with a smile as Coraline began to eat. The food was delicious, richer than anything her real mother had ever cooked. Every bite melted on her tongue, filling her with warmth. The other mother never looked away. The buttons glimmered. "You see," she said softly, "this is where you belong." Coraline swallowed, the taste still on her tongue, her eyes fixed on those black, gleaming buttons. Something inside her whispered that nothing here was as simple as it seemed. The warmth of the food lingered on Coraline's tongue, but unease lingered in her chest. She pushed her plate back, and the other mother's smile grew even wider, her button eyes glittering. "You'll want to meet him," she said, rising from the table. "He's been waiting, too." Coraline followed as the other mother led her through the bright hallway. The wallpaper here was fresh and shining, the patterns alive with color. The lamps glowed without buzzing. The wooden floors gleamed like polished stone. Everything was familiar, yet too sharp, too perfect, as if a picture had come alive. They stopped at a door that Coraline knew well, her father's study. Inside, the room was bright, the desk polished, and the air smelled faintly of ink and paper. And sitting at the desk, turning to greet her, was her father. Or almost her father. He looked taller, neater, sharper around the edges. His face was bright and smiling, his glasses gleaming in the golden light. His fingers rested on the keys of a piano that hadn't been there before, and when he saw her, he began to play. The music flowed like a river, cheerful and rich, each note filling the air with warmth. His head bobbed gently with the rhythm, his smile wide. "Coraline," he said, his voice deep and smooth, "my clever, curious girl, at last you're here." The sound of his words wrapped around her, so much like her real father's voice, yet not the same. There was no absent-mindedness in it, no distraction. He looked only at her, as though she were the most important thing in the world. Coraline stepped closer, her eyes wide. "You're, my father?" "Your other father," he said, bowing slightly with a grin. "And everything here is for you. The music, the garden, the stories, all yours." He played again, the notes tumbling like laughter, and the other mother clapped her hands together softly, pleased. Coraline's chest tightened. The sound was lovely. The glow of the room was comforting. The smiles were wide and constant. Too constant. She shifted on her feet. Something about the way both of them looked at her too closely, too expectantly, made her uneasy. The other father finished his song with a flourish and leaned back in his chair, his button eyes catching the lamplight. "Stay with us, Coraline," he said softly. "We'll take care of you. Always." The words drifted through the room like music, like a promise and like a trap. Coraline forced a smile, though her stomach twisted. She glanced at the door, at the hallway, at the place where the tunnel must still wait in the shadows. Everything here was brighter. Everything here was perfect. And yet the buttons watched her. It is the story of Coraline, a girl with bright eyes and a restless heart. A girl who found herself in a new house. A house with long shadows and secrets tucked away behind doors. So as you lie there, under the soft weight of your blankets, take a slow breath in and let it out. Let your eyelids grow heavy and your thoughts slow down. We are going to step softly into Coraline's world now, into the hush of her first night, into the quiet of a house that seems almost alive. The house was old. It had seen many lives before Coraline's family moved in. The floors creaked when you walked across them, as though the wood remembered every step that had ever passed by. The wallpaper peeled slightly at the corners, revealing faded colors beneath. And the hallways seemed longer than they should have been, narrow and dim, stretching into corners that curved away into silence. Coraline noticed these things. She noticed the way the air smelled faintly of dust and rain. She noticed how the tall windows caught the light during the day, scattering it across the walls like pieces of broken glass. And she noticed how the silence in certain rooms felt heavy, as though waiting for something to happen. Her parents were busy, too busy to see these things. Her father clicked away at his computer, typing and typing. Her mother unpacked boxes, muttering softly about space and storage. But Coraline wandered, curious, restless. She wanted to know every inch of this house. She wanted to find the parts that others had overlooked. One afternoon, she drifted into the drawing room. It was a quiet place with large windows that opened out toward the garden. The garden was wild and tangled, not at all neat or orderly. Flowers sprouted wherever they pleased, twisting among weeds and brambles. Tall grass swayed with the wind, and beyond the hedges the mist stretched like pale ribbons curling across the ground. Coraline pressed her forehead lightly against the cool glass of the window. She loved garden. They always seemed to hide things, hidden paths, tiny insects, little worlds tucked under leaves. This one was untamed, almost mysterious, as though it had secrets of its own. But as she turned back from the window, something inside the room caught her eye. On the far wall, behind a piece of faded wallpaper, was a door. It was small. So small, in fact, that most adults might never even notice it. But Coraline noticed. Her sharp eyes always found the things others overlooked. The door frame was narrow, the handle round and cool to the touch. It looked old, older than the rest of the room, as though it had been there long before the house was divided into pieces. "Mother," Coraline asked one afternoon, her voice curious but calm, "what's behind that door?" Her mother glanced up from unpacking dishes. "That door? Oh, nothing interesting. It just goes nowhere." But Coraline tilted her head. "A door that goes nowhere? How can that be?" Her mother sighed softly, wiping her hands on a towel. She fetched a key from a drawer, a long iron key with teeth worn from time. She placed it into the lock, and with a soft click, the door swung open. And behind it was only a wall. Bricks, gray and unmoving, sealing the passage completely. Her mother gave a little shrug. "There, you see, nothing at all." She closed the door again and slipped the key back into its drawer. But Coraline kept staring. Her eyes lingered on the tiny door, her thoughts circling like moths around a flame. Why would there be a door that leads only to bricks? That night, the house was quiet. Rain tapped softly at the windows, steady and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of the night. The wind moved gently through the cracks of the old house, carrying faint whispers that sounded almost like voices. Coraline lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. The wallpaper in her room seemed to shift in the half-light, the patterns swimming like sleepy waves. She thought of the door. She couldn't stop thinking of the door. In her mind, she imagined it waiting for her down in the drawing room. She imagined the little handle, the faint click of the key, the cold gray wall of bricks. But part of her heart, part of her restless, curious heart, believed there was more to it than that. She turned on her side, pulled her blanket closer, and let her breathing slow. And as her eyelids grew heavy, the door followed her into her dreams. Why would someone build such a thing and then close it forever? In her dream, she was back in the drawing room. The door was there, waiting, patient and small. She reached for it, and in the dream there was no key needed at all. It opened easily. But this time, when the door swung forward, there were no bricks. Instead, there was a tunnel. Long, dark, and dusty. The air smelled faintly of earth and stone. Its walls curved inward like the inside of a throat, and the shadows stretched endlessly ahead. Coraline stepped forward, and her footsteps echoed softly, as though the tunnel itself was listening. With each step, a strange golden glow appeared farther ahead. It was warm. It pulsed gently like a lantern in the fog. Somewhere, just beyond her hearing, was a sound, a song, a lullaby sung in whispers, soft and slow, pulling her forward. She wanted to follow it. She wanted to see where it led. The dream's invitation. Coraline moved closer to the glow. Her small hands brushed the walls of the tunnel, rough with dust and cobwebs. The sound grew clearer now, a hum, almost a voice, promising warmth, promising something just beyond reach. She stepped closer and closer, until her fingertips almost touched the golden glow. And then the dream dissolved. The glow vanished, the tunnel fell away, and she opened her eyes. She was back in her bed, the rain still whispering against the glass, the house still creaking softly in its sleep. The door was far away, down the hallway, closed and quiet. But Coraline knew deep inside that the dream had left something behind. The door wasn't just a door. It was waiting. And its secrets had only begun to call her name. And so, Coraline's first night in the new house came to an end. A night filled with whispers, shadows, and the mystery of a little door. Her curiosity had been awakened. The house had spoken to her in its own quiet way. Tomorrow would bring more questions, and perhaps more answers. But for now, you, my sleepy cutie, can let your breathing slow. Let the rain fall softly in your imagination. Let the little door wait quietly in your dreams. You are safe. You are warm. And just like Coraline, you are drifting gently into sleep, where new adventures wait for you in the soft glow of dreams. You remember, don't you? The dream. The tunnel. The soft, golden glow at the end. It was only a dream, but it felt so real. And now the morning has come. The house, still quiet, has many more secrets to share. Let us drift with Coraline into the light of a new day. Morning light in the old house. Coraline awoke to pale sunlight. The curtains in her room glowed with soft gold, their fabric shifting gently with the morning breeze. Rain had passed in the night, and the air smelled fresh, sharp with the scent of wet grass and damp stone. The house felt different in the daylight. Where shadows had once lingered, streaks of sunlight stretched across the floorboards. Where the wallpaper had seemed to move in the half-dark, it now looked faded and still. But even in the calm of morning, Coraline sensed something. A kind of hush in the air, as though the house was holding its breath, waiting for her to explore. Breakfast with distractions. In the kitchen, her parents were already busy. Her father sat at the table, hunched over his notes, writing quickly with a pen that scratched and tapped. Her mother sorted through papers, recipes, and boxes, still muttering about where things should go. "Eat your breakfast, Coraline," her mother said absently without looking up. A bowl of cereal waited for her, the milk making the flakes soft and soggy. Coraline sat, but her thoughts weren't on food. She stirred the cereal slowly, her mind circling back to the dream, to the tunnel, to the golden glow. It felt as though the dream had been more than just a dream. It felt like a memory of something that might truly exist. "May I go outside?" she asked. Her mother waved a distracted hand. "Fine, but be careful. Stay where I can call you." Coraline smiled faintly. She didn't plan to wander far, not outside at least. There was still much of the house to see, exploring the forgotten corners. The house was bigger than it first appeared. Narrow staircases curled up to hidden landing. Closets stretched deeper than expected, filled with dust and faint cobwebs. Some doors were locked, some doors stuck, and some doors opened only to reveal bare, empty rooms where the air felt heavy, as though someone had left long ago but forgotten to take their shadows with them. Coraline wandered slowly, her fingers trailing along the walls. She listened to the faint groans of the floorboards. She watched how the light shifted when she turned corners. And always her thoughts returned to the little door. She had seen it sealed with bricks. She had dreamed of it opening into a tunnel. And now, awake and curious, she longed to see it again. Returned to the little door. In the drawing room, the little door waited. It was quiet, simple, almost ordinary. But Coraline felt its presence as surely as if it had been breathing. She crouched before it, her hand hovering just above the handle. The memory of her dream returned to her with vivid sharpness, the tunnel, the glow, the whisper of a lullaby. She touched the handle. It was cool beneath her fingers. The lock was silent, unmoving. The key. Where had her mother put the key? Coraline remembered the drawer, the faint scrape of iron teeth, the soft click when it turned. She bit her lip, glancing around. The drawer was shut now, the key hidden away. She whispered to herself, almost like a promise. "I'll find it again, I'll open it." And as if in answer, the house gave a soft creak, the sound of shifting beams, or maybe, just maybe, a whisper of agreement. Strange noises in the halls. As Coraline turned to leave, she paused. From somewhere deeper in the house came a faint sound. It was not her mother. It was not her father. It was something else, soft, almost playful. It might have been the scurry of mice in the walls. It might have been the wind pressing against the eaves. It might have been something else entirely. Coraline stepped lightly into the hallway, listening. The sound faded, like laughter slipping away into shadows. Her heart beat faster, not with fear, but with the thrill of curiosity. She smiled to herself. Yes, this house was strange. Yes, it held secrets. And yes, she would find them. Now the day has passed, and the sky is darkening. The night is coming, and the little door has not been forgotten. A long afternoon. The hours drifted slowly through the old house. Coraline's parents worked without pause, their voices rising and falling in distracted tones. Her father muttered about paragraphs and notes, the click of his keyboard tapping endlessly. Her mother rattled dishes into cupboards, sighed at papers, and frowned at boxes that never seemed to empty. No one noticed Coraline wandering, not really. She traced the edges of wallpaper with her fingertips. She counted steps between doors. She leaned into windows to watch the garden bend in the breeze. But her thoughts circled back again and again to the drawing room, to the little door, to the faint sense that something waited there just beyond her reach. Twilight in the garden. As the sun began to lower, Coraline slipped outside into the garden. The air was cool, touched with the dampness of morning rain. The garden stretched wide and wild, a patchwork of tangled flowers, tall grasses, and twisting vines. Stray cats wandered through, their eyes glimmering in the dimming light. One, a black cat with sleek fur, sat silently on the garden wall. It watched Coraline with bright, unblinking eyes, and though it made no sound, Coraline felt as if it knew something she did not. She tilted her head at it, curious. But when she took a step closer, the cat leapt softly down and vanished into the bushes, leaving only a rustle behind. The sky turned dusky purple. The air grew still, and Coraline felt the pull of the house again, calling her back inside. Night falls in the old house. Dinner was quiet, half forgotten. Her parents spoke about work and letters, their words tumbling into one another, none of them important to Coraline. She ate silently, her thoughts elsewhere. The door. Always the door. When the plates were cleared, when her parents returned to their tasks, Coraline slipped away. The house was dim now. The hallway was filled with shadows that stretched long across the floor. Every creak of the boards echoed more deeply at night. Every sigh of the wind against the window seemed louder. She tiptoed toward the drawing room. Her heart beat softly but quickly, like the flutter of a moth's wings. The little door at night. There it was. The door. Small, ordinary, but not ordinary at all. The moonlight slipped through the tall windows, silvering the walls, falling across the tiny door. It looked almost alive in that pale light, as though it had been waiting all along for this moment. Coraline knelt before it. Her fingers touched the handle, cool against her skin. She thought of the dream. She thought of the tunnel. She thought of the glow. The key. She needed the key. She rose softly and moved to the drawer where her mother had placed it. Her hand slipped inside, and there it was, cold, heavy, and sharp with age. She held it for a long moment, the iron pressing into her palm. Her breath caught in her chest. And then slowly she returned to the door. The click of the lock. The key slid into the lock with a sound so faint it might have been a sigh. Coraline's fingers trembled as she turned it. Click. The lock gave way. The handle moved beneath her hand, and the little door swung open. At first there was nothing. The wall of bricks stood where it had before, gray and solid. Coraline's heart dipped. Had it only been a dream after all? But then she blinked. The bricks shimmered. They blurred like mist dissolving under the sun. And where the wall had been, a dark tunnel stretched forward, curling away into shadows. It was the tunnel from her dream. Dust clung to its walls. The air smelled faintly of stone and earth. And at the far end, glowing softly, was that same golden light. The air inside was cool and dusty. The tunnel stretched forward like the throat of the house itself, curving into shadows. And far, far away, at the very end, there was a golden glow, soft and steady, waiting like a lantern in the dark. Coraline took a deep breath. And then, slowly, bravely, she stepped inside. The tunnel's embrace. The moment Coraline crossed the threshold, the air changed. Behind her, the house fell silent, as though holding its breath. Ahead of her, the tunnel whispered with echoes, each step sending tiny ripples of sound along the curved walls. The ground was firm but uneven. Dust rose softly beneath her shoes, stirring in the faint light. Cobwebs brushed against her fingertips when she reached out to steady herself. And yet she was not afraid. Not really. Her heart raced, yes, but with curiosity, not terror. There was something inviting about the tunnel, as though it had been waiting just for her. The glow ahead grew brighter with each step. It pulsed gently, warm and golden, like a heartbeat in the dark. And with it came a faint hum, a low sound that seemed almost like a lullaby carried on the air. Echoes in the darkness. Coraline paused once halfway through. She turned her head, glancing back. The door behind her was small now, a pale rectangle of moonlight shrinking in the distance. For a moment she wondered if she should return. But then she heard it. A faint whisper, soft as breath. It came not from behind, but ahead. It seemed to say her name. Coraline. Her eyes widened. Her steps quickened, though still careful. The tunnel seemed to stretch and breathe around her, its walls shifting with shadows. The glow pulled her onward. Finally, after what felt like both a long journey and no time at all, Coraline reached the end of the tunnel. The glow spilled brighter now, warm against her face. And then, with a final step, she emerged. Her eyes blinked at the sight before her. It was her house, but not her house. The drawing room was there, but brighter, sharper, more alive. The wallpaper glowed with rich color. The windows shimmered with clean glass, polished and gleaming. The furniture looked newer, softer, more welcoming. It was as if the house had been repainted by dreams, made perfect in every detail. And the air was warm, sweet, touched with the faint scent of flowers. In the doorway stood a woman. She looked so much like Coraline's mother, the same height, the same smile, the same neat hair. And yet she was different. Her skin seemed smoother, her smile warmer, her voice softer when she said, "Welcome home, Coraline." But her eyes were not eyes at all. They were black buttons, sewn neatly in place, shiny and unblinking. Coraline froze, unsure of what to say. The woman knelt, her button eyes gleaming in the golden light. "You must be hungry, dear. Come inside. Everything is ready for you." Her voice was soft, comforting, almost like the lullaby Coraline had heard in the tunnel. And though the button eyes unsettled her, Coraline felt no fear, only wonder, and a hint of unease like a shadow that follows even in the brightest light. Coraline stepped farther into the room. It was strange, familiar, yet different. Everything looked the same, and yet not the same. The kitchen smelled of fresh bread and butter. The stove glowed with warmth. On the table, a feast waited, steaming dishes, sweet treats, glasses filled with sparkling juice. "Sit, darling," said the woman with button eyes. Her voice was soft, her smile unbroken. "Everything here is for you." Coraline hesitated. She looked around. The colors were brighter, the food richer, the air warmer. It was her home made perfect, made magical. And yet, Deep in her chest, her heart whispered caution. Something about the place was too perfect. Something about the woman was too kind. And those eyes, those shiny black buttons. Coraline sat slowly at the table, her small hands folded in her lap. The golden glow filled the room, wrapping her in warmth. The feast waited. The woman with button eyes smiled, and the house around her seemed to hum softly, like a dream made real. Coraline did not know yet what this place was. She did not know what secrets it held. But she knew this much. The door had opened a path. The tunnel had led her here. And her journey was only beginning. The night outside was still, the tunnel waiting silently in the shadows. And as Coraline took her first bite, the story leaned forward, ready to whisper its next secret. But for now, sleepy cutie, let your eyes close gently. Let the golden glow soften in your mind. Let the whispers of the tunnel fade into dreams. You are safe, you are warm, and like Coraline, you are drifting into mystery. At the table, the woman with button eyes welcomed her, smiling gently. Her voice as soft as a lullaby. And though Coraline felt a whisper of unease in her chest, her curiosity was stronger. She was ready to see more. She was ready to know what this strange new world had to show her. The food on the table looked like something out of a dream. There was roasted chicken, steaming hot, with skin browned to perfection. There were golden potatoes drizzled with butter and vegetables that smelled sweet and fresh. Cakes and tarts and candies sparkled under the warm light, their colors brighter than anything Coraline had seen before. The woman with button eyes sat across from her, still smiling, her head tilted slightly. "Eat, darling," she said. "You must be hungry." Coraline picked up a fork and tasted a small bite. The flavor was rich, richer than anything she had ever eaten. Every taste was perfect, as though it had been made exactly for her, and yet it was too perfect. So perfect that it almost didn't feel real. She ate slowly, her eyes glancing around the room. The wallpaper glowed with brighter colors than in her own house. The chairs were softer. The lamp shone with a golden light that never flickered. Everything here was familiar, but also more. As she finished her bite, Coraline heard a sound behind her. The door creaked open, and in walked a man. He looked like her father, tall, thin, with the same neat clothes and the same quiet smile. But his eyes, too, were buttons. Shiny black buttons, smooth and unblinking. "Ah, Coraline," he said warmly. "Welcome home." His voice was gentle, but softer than her real father's. There was no distraction in it, no hurry, no tapping of keyboards. This father's attention was fully on her, as though nothing else in the world mattered. He sat at the table, folding his hands neatly. "Would you like to hear a song, Coraline?" he asked. And without waiting for an answer, he began to hum. The tune was strange, low and lilting, like something made up on the spot. His voice was not perfect, but it was kind, and it carried a rhythm that wrapped the room in a dreamy haze. Coraline listened quietly, unsure of what to feel. It was comforting, yes. But the button eyes never blinked. After the meal, the woman with button eyes rose gracefully. "Come," she said. "There is more to see." Coraline followed her through the halls. And everywhere she looked, she saw her own house, but not quite. The wallpaper gleamed with richer color. The floors shone with a fresh polish. The air was warmer, touched with the scent of flowers and spice. Every room was brighter, more alive, as though it had been painted in dream colors. Even the smallest corners seemed welcoming, glowing softly as if waiting for Coraline to notice them. Yet as she walked, Coraline noticed the stillness. There were no creaks of settling wood, no whispers of pipes or sighs of the wind. The house was alive, yes, but in its own quiet, watching way. The woman with button eyes led Coraline to the windows. "Look," she said gently, "your garden awaits." Coraline pressed her face to the glass. Her heart leapt. It was the garden, but transformed. The flowers bloomed in impossible colors, petals glowing like jewels. The trees swayed with blossoms that shimmered under the moonlight, as though lit from within. Paths wound through the garden, glowing faintly with light, guiding the way like ribbons of silver. Shapes moved among the leaves, bright, darting things like fireflies, though larger, almost like living sparks. And in the distance, the black cat appeared again, sitting tall upon a wall. Its eyes glimmered with the same sharpness as before, but this time it did not run. It simply stared as if waiting. Coraline gasped softly. The garden was alive in a way no garden should be. It was beautiful. It was magical. And yet, something about its perfection made her chest tighten with unease. "Do you see, Coraline?" the woman with button eyes whispered, her voice warm. "This is your home. Everything here is for you. Here, you will never be ignored. Here, you will always be loved." The man with button eyes stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "And we will always be here," he said. "Always only for you." Their smiles were soft. Their voices were kind. But their button eyes gleamed in the golden light, dark and endless. Coraline swallowed, her heart fluttering. Part of her wanted to believe them. Part of her wanted to stay in this glowing, perfect place. And yet, deep inside, a whisper tugged at her, reminding her of the tunnel, the shadows, the strangeness of it all. Coraline stood between her other parents, gazing at the garden, glowing under the moonlight. The house shimmered with warmth. The air smelled sweet, and everything seemed to whisper her name. It was beautiful. It was magical. And it was unsettling. For Coraline, the adventure had only just begun. The little door had opened more than a passage. It had opened a reflection, a mirror world, both comforting and strange. And now, sleepy cutie, it is time for you to rest. Let the golden glow fade softly in your mind. Let the whisper of strange gardens drift like mist through your dreams. You are safe. You are warm. And like Coraline, you are only at the beginning of a journey. The woman with button eyes guided Coraline back to the drawing room. The fire crackled brightly in the hearth, though Coraline had not seen anyone light it. The chairs looked softer than clouds, cushions puffed and inviting. The lamp burned with a golden glow that never dimmed. "Here, dear," the woman whispered. "Rest. This is your home now." Coraline sat slowly. The warmth was comforting, but too complete, as though the house itself wrapped her in a blanket she had not asked for. She ran her hand over the armrest. The fabric felt smooth, perfect, without a single tear or stain. Everything here was perfect. Too perfect. The other father's song. The man with button eyes sat across from her at a piano. He began to play, his fingers gliding across the keys with ease. The tune was soft, steady, like waves rolling to shore. His head bobbed with the rhythm, his smile fixed in place. The music filled the room, calming and strange all at once. Coraline felt her eyelids grow heavy, her body sinking deeper into the chair. It was beautiful. But behind the beauty was something hollow, something that made her chest tighten. The man did not blink as he played. His button eyes stared straight ahead, unbroken, glossy and endless. A whisper in the hall. Coraline stirred. She thought she heard something beyond the music. A faint sound hidden beneath the piano's notes. A whisper. She tilted her head, straining to listen. There it was again. Faint, fragile, almost like the voices of children. It drifted from the hall, from somewhere behind the walls. Her heart fluttered. The whispers were soft, sorrowful, like voices calling from far away. And though she could not make out the words, she felt them tugging at her, pulling her attention from the warm glow of the room. When she glanced at the woman with button eyes, she found the smile still there. But for the first time, Coraline thought it looked tight, as though it hid something behind it. The cat returns. Later, when Coraline slipped outside to breathe the cool night air, she saw him again. The black cat sat on the wall of the glowing garden, its tail curled neatly around its paws. Its eyes gleamed with sharp light, watching her. This time, the cat spoke. Its voice was low, smooth, carrying a hint of warning. "Be careful, Coraline," it said. "Not everything is as it seems." Coraline gasped. Her heart leapt at the sound. But when she blinked, the cat was gone. The garden shimmered quietly, flowers bowing their glowing heads, as though nothing had happened. A restless sleep. That night, the woman with button eyes tucked Coraline into bed. The sheets were soft, freshly pressed, smelling of lavender. The pillow cradled her head like a cloud. "Sweet dreams, my darling," the woman whispered. "We will always be here." The lamp dimmed. The room fell into silence. But Coraline could not sleep. She turned and shifted, her mind restless. The whispers she had heard returned in her thoughts. The button eyes gleamed in the darkness of her memory. The black cat's warning echoed in her ears. This world was beautiful. This world was perfect. But this world was not hers. As Coraline lay in the too-soft bed, her eyes grew heavy at last. Her breath slowed, her body sinking into the perfect sheets. But her dreams were not easy. They were filled with tunnels and whispers, gardens glowing with impossible light, and faces with button eyes that never blinked. And somewhere, faint but clear, voices called to her from the shadows. "Help us, Coraline." The little door had opened. The house had revealed its secret. And Coraline's journey was only just beginning. Now, sleepy cutie, let your eyes fall closed as Coraline's finally do. Let the whispers soften into nothing. Let the golden glow fade into gentle darkness. You are safe, you are loved, and your dreams are your own. The house glowed warmly. Its lamps steady, its walls painted in brighter colors than Coraline had ever known. The fire in the hearth whispered softly, and the food on the table steamed with rich scents. Everything here seemed perfect. But Coraline could not stop looking at the other mother's eyes. They were black buttons, smooth, polished, round as coins. They caught the light like glass, glimmering with each tilt of her head. And though they had no pupils, no whites, they followed Coraline wherever she moved. The other mother smiled, her button eyes gleaming. "You're safe here," she whispered, reaching out with long, graceful fingers to smooth Coraline's hair. Safe and loved and wanted. Her voice was soft, but the buttons told another story. They hid everything. No flicker of surprise, no spark of laughter, No flash of anger or tenderness, just blank blackness, shining and endless. Coraline sat very still. The other mother moved around the kitchen with practiced grace, humming as she gathered plates, straightened chairs, stirred pots that no longer needed stirring. Every movement seemed too smooth, too perfect, as though she had practiced them all for this moment. And always, when she turned her head, the buttons glimmered. At last, she sat across from Coraline again, folding her hands neatly, her smile stretched wide. "Doesn't it feel better here?" she asked. "Don't you see how much brighter everything is?" Coraline swallowed. "It's nice," she said carefully, her eyes drifting to the buttons again. The other mother leaned forward, resting her chin on her hands. "I can give you everything you've ever wanted," she said. "But first, Coraline." Her button eyes shone darkly, reflecting the firelight. "You must learn to see the world as I do." After the meal, the other mother rose from the table, smoothing her apron with long, careful hands. Her button eyes gleamed as she said, "You should meet the others, Coraline. They've been waiting to see you." Coraline followed her into the hallway, her footsteps quiet against the polished floor. The house felt alive here, the wallpaper almost breathing, the lamps glowing steadily as though fueled by something more than electricity. At the end of the hall, the other mother opened a door and Coraline stepped into the parlor. Inside were Miss Spink and Miss Forcible. Or rather, their other selves. They looked younger here, brighter, dressed in grand costumes, as if they had stepped straight out of the theater. Ribbons trailed from their gowns, pearls gleamed around their necks, and their voices were rich and cheerful as they greeted her. "Darling Coraline," cried Miss Spink, her voice high and sweet. "At last, you've come to watch us perform." Miss Forcible clapped her hands together, her smile wide. "We've prepared something just for you, my dear." Coraline almost smiled back. Their voices were warm, their movements lively, their joy impossible to ignore. But then she looked closer. Their eyes. Black buttons, round and glossy, sewn neatly into their faces. They glittered like beads in the lamplight, following her every movement, empty yet watchful. Coraline's stomach twisted. She forced a small nod, stepping back as they twirled and sang. Their laughter filled the room, bright and endless, but the buttons never changed, never softened, never blinked. The other mother clapped politely at their performance, her smile fixed, her own black eyes glimmering in approval. "See, Coraline," she said softly, "everyone here is happy. Everyone wants to please you." Coraline glanced again at the buttons. They hid everything, every flicker of true feeling, every secret thought. Behind them was nothing but darkness. She whispered, barely loud enough to hear herself, "They're not real." When the performance ended, Coraline slipped quietly from the parlor. The songs of the other Miss Spink and other Miss Forcible still echoed behind her, bright and hollow at once. She walked quickly down the hallway, her skin prickling, as if the walls themselves were watching. In the garden doorframe, something moved. A black cat stretched lazily across the threshold, its fur shining in the golden light. It blinked at Coraline with wide green eyes, real eyes, sharp and alive. She stopped. "You?" she whispered. The cat tilted its head, tail flicking. Then, without opening its mouth, a voice seemed to slide into the air around her. Quite a show, wasn't it? Coraline blinked. The cat had spoken. Not like the neighbors, not like the other mother, but in a way that felt like thought and sound tangled together. "You can talk," she said softly. "Of course I can," the cat replied, stretching again. "But only here. In this place, words have different rules." Coraline knelt, staring into its sharp green eyes. "Why don't you have buttons?" The cat's whiskers twitched. "Because I don't need them." It stepped closer, circling her ankles. "And because I am not one of them." Coraline's heart gave a nervous beat. "Who are they?" The cat paused, sitting back to lick its paw. Then it looked up again, its eyes gleaming. "They are what they seem, and they are not. The other mother makes them. She shapes them to please you, to keep you here." The word sent a chill through Coraline. "But why?" The cat's gaze was steady. "Because she wants you." The garden beyond glowed with impossible flowers, their petals too wide, too bright, moving as if they breathed. Coraline's eyes flicked back to the cat. "Be careful," it said softly. "She'll never let you go once you've looked too long into those button eyes." The cat slipped into the garden shadows, its green eyes the last thing to fade. Coraline stood very still, the other mother's laughter echoing faintly from somewhere behind her. The buttons gleamed in her mind, black and endless. That night, the other mother led Coraline back to the bright kitchen. The fire glowed warmly, and the table was once again set with food too perfect to resist steaming bread, sweet fruit, golden pies that seemed to shine. Coraline sat, but she did not eat. Her eyes never left the other mother's face. The buttons gleamed in the firelight, black and endless. The other mother smiled, her long fingers folding neatly over one another. "You've seen how happy everyone is here, haven't you?" she said softly. "Your other father, your neighbors, even the garden itself. Everything here exists for you." Coraline's throat tightened. She nodded slightly. The other mother leaned closer, her voice low and smooth. "And it can all be yours. Forever." Coraline blinked. "Forever?" "Yeah," the woman whispered. "You can stay here with me, with us. No chores, no loneliness, no parents too busy to listen. Only warmth and comfort and love. Always." The words curled around Coraline like the scent of the pies on the table, sweet, heavy, tempting. For a moment she wanted to believe them. But then, the other mother opened her hand. On her palm lay a spool of black thread, a curved silver needle, and two round, shining buttons. "Just one little thing, my darling," she said gently. "To stay here, to be truly ours. You must let me sew these into your eyes." The fire crackled softly as though listening. Coraline froze. She stared at the buttons, black, glossy, blank. Her stomach lurched, and her skin prickled, as though the shadows in the room had drawn closer. The other mother tilted her head, smiling still. "Then you'll be like us. Then we'll be a family." Her button eyes glittered, wide and empty. Coraline pushed back from the table, her chair scraping the polished floor. Her heart pounded, but she couldn't look away from the buttons lying so neatly on the other mother's palm. They seemed to shine brighter, pulling at her, asking her to give up everything she knew for the promise of something that felt almost real. Almost. The other mother's smile widened, her voice velvet soft. "All you have to do is say yes." Coraline stared at the buttons resting in the other mother's palm. They seemed so small, so harmless, yet they carried with them a weight that pressed into her chest. Black and smooth, they shone like polished stone, reflecting the firelight in tiny circles of darkness. Her hands trembled in her lap. Part of her wanted to shut her eyes to pretend she hadn't heard. But the other mother's voice lingered, soft and steady, wrapping around her like a lullaby. "All you have to do," she whispered, "is say yes." Coraline shook her head, only slightly at first. "No," she said quietly. The other mother's smile did not fade, though her fingers curled slowly over the needle and thread. "No," she repeated, as if the word were new to her. Coraline swallowed hard. "I don't want buttons for eyes." The silence that followed was heavy. The fire crackled once, sharp and loud, then dimmed, its warmth retreating into the shadows. The other mother's smile stretched wider, though it no longer reached her face. Her button eyes gleamed darker now, colder. "You'll change your mind," she said at last, her voice still smooth but edged with something sharper. "Children always do. They always see that this is better." Coraline pushed back her chair and stood. Her legs trembled, but she lifted her chin. "I like my own eyes. I'm going home." For the first time, the other mother's smile faltered. Her head tilted slowly, and the buttons reflected the light in long, thin streaks. "Home," she repeated, almost tasting the word. "Yes," Coraline whispered. The other mother leaned back, folding her hands neatly once again, though her fingers tapped against one another in a rhythm too precise. "Very well, Coraline," she said softly, "if that is what you want. For now." Her voice lingered on the last words like a thread pulled too tight. Coraline turned toward the door, her heart racing, but the weight of the other mother's gaze followed her, heavy as stone. The buttons watched. They did not blink. And as Coraline left the kitchen, she knew that saying no was only the beginning. The hallway was quiet as Coraline walked, the hush pressing against her ears like cotton. The lamps still glowed, but their light seemed weaker now, shadows clinging at the corners of the walls. She passed the parlor where her other neighbors had performed. The velvet curtains hung stiff, and the stage lights flickered faintly as though they no longer had the strength to shine. A whisper of laughter drifted out high and hollow, repeating itself like an echo that had forgotten its source. Coraline quickened her steps. In the study, her other father sat hunched over the piano. His fingers moved mechanically, striking the same tune again and again, notes spilling without pause, without life. The smile was still on his face, stretched too wide, frozen in place. His button eyes gleamed dully, staring straight ahead. Coraline's stomach tightened. She turned away before he could look at her. The air in the house felt heavier now, thicker, as if it clung to her skin. The sweetness she had smelled before was gone, replaced by something faintly metallic like rust or dust. She pushed open the door to the garden. At first, it was still beautiful flowers blooming in impossible shapes, colors glowing brighter than the sky. But as she stepped closer, she saw that many of the petals were fraying at the edges, curling in on themselves. The trees swayed without wind, their branches twitching like restless fingers. And there, sitting atop the stone wall, was the black cat. Its green eyes glowed sharp and real against the false brightness of the garden. "You've seen it now," the cat said softly. "The cracks, the seams." Coraline folded her arms, though her hands trembled. "It's all fallen apart." The cat flicked its tail. "It was never whole to begin with. This place exists only to keep you, Coraline. It shows you what you want until it cannot hold the shape any longer." Coraline looked back at the house. Its windows stared blankly, their light flickering like dying candles. Inside, she thought she saw the other mother's shadow move long, thin, and waiting. The cat's voice slipped into the silence again. "She'll come for you soon, and her buttons see everything." Coraline shivered. The garden's false glow pressed against her eyes, but she could not shake the image of the other mother's black gaze, endless and unblinking, waiting in the dark. That night, Coraline lay curled beneath the quilt in the small bedroom of the other world. The walls glowed faintly with painted patterns of stars and moons, as if someone had carefully arranged them just for her. The bed was softer than her own at home, the pillow cool against her cheek. But sleep did not come easily. She tossed and turned, listening to the strange silence that filled the house. No creak of settling wood, no hum of distant traffic, no rustle of leaves at the window, only stillness. At last her eyes closed. In her dreams, she was walking down the hallway of the other house. The lamps flickered above her, each one dimmer than the last. The wallpaper peeled away in places, revealing darkness underneath, deep and endless. She reached the drawing room, and the little door was waiting for her, open wide. Beyond it stretched the tunnel, but this time it pulsed and shifted like something alive. Coraline stepped forward, though she did not want to. The tunnel whispered her name. Coraline. The walls pressed closer, gray fabric folding and stretching like breathing lungs. She stumbled forward, her feet sinking into soft ground. From the shadows ahead, she thought, she saw button eyes gleaming, not two, but dozens, watching, waiting. She gasped, turning to run, but the door was gone. Behind her, only more tunnel stretched, endless and dark. Coraline jerked awake, her heart racing. The quilt tangled around her legs, the painted stars on the walls glowing faintly in the dim light. The room was quiet, too quiet. She sat up, holding her breath. In the corner by the wardrobe, shadows seemed thicker than they should have been. Darker, deeper, as though they were not shadows at all, but something that had slipped in while she slept. For a moment, she thought she saw them shift. The faint glimmer of something round and glossy, like two tiny black buttons peering out. She blinked. The corner was empty again. But sleep no longer felt safe. The air in the room felt thick, like it was waiting. Coraline slipped out of bed and pressed her bare feet to the polished floor. It was cold, colder than it should have been, as though the warmth had been drained away. She moved quietly toward the door, every step slow, careful not to make a sound. The hallway beyond was darker than before. The lamps that had once glowed steady and warm now flickered weakly, their lights sputtering like candles about to die. Shadows stretched long along the walls, pooling in corners, clinging to the ceiling. Coraline swallowed. Her throat felt dry. She whispered to herself, "It's just shadows, that's all." But then one of them moved. At first it was only the corner of her eye, a flicker, a ripple, then another. The shadow along the baseboard swelled, curling upward as though it had grown too heavy to lie flat. And there within the shifting black, she thought she saw them again, two round glimmers, dull and glossy. Button eyes. Coraline stepped back, pressing her shoulders to the wall. The shadow quivered, then slid away into the next corner, as silent as breath. Her chest rose and fell too quickly. She wanted to run, to call out, but her voice seemed caught in her throat. She walked forward instead, forcing her feet to move. The silence was so thick, it seemed to hum in her ears. The farther she went, the stranger the shadows became. Some stretched across the ceiling like spider webs, twitching when she passed beneath them. Others lingered by the door frames, shifting as if turning to follow her. And in each one, she thought she glimpsed the same dark gleam, round, black, empty. Watching, always watching. At the far end of the hall, she found herself before the mirror. It stood tall, its surface dim and cloudy, reflecting her faintly in the flickering light. But when she leaned closer, she froze. For just an instant, her reflection did not have her eyes. It had buttons. Coraline stood before the mirror, her breath catching in her throat. The flickering light of the lamps made her reflection ripple, as though the glass were water. She blinked once, twice. Her own eyes were there again, blue-gray, tired. But for that heartbeat, she had seen them, the buttons, shining black, stitched neatly where her eyes should have been. Her fingers trembled as she raised a hand toward the glass. Her reflection copied the movement, but slower, like it lagged a moment behind. The tips of her fingers brushed the cool surface. The mirror shivered, not with sound, but with a vibration, faint and deep, that moved up her arm. Coraline gasped and stepped back, her reflection staying pressed against the glass, as if it longed to come closer. And then she saw them. Not one reflection, but several. Faint, layered shapes behind the cloudy glass. Children. Their faces pale and their mouths silent. Their eyes not eyes at all, but the same black buttons, stitched in place. Coraline's chest tightened. She reached out again, pressing her palm against the glass. The children lifted their hands too, though theirs were weak, trembling. One of them leaned close, its button eyes gleaming, its lips parted just enough to whisper something that did not carry sound, only the shape of a word. "Help!" Coraline stumbled back, her heel striking the wall. Her heart hammered in her chest as the reflections faded, the surface of the mirror smoothing again. Now it showed only her small, pale shaking. But the silence in the hall had changed. It felt heavier, thicker, as though the house had noticed her discovery. Somewhere deep in the walls, she thought, she heard it a low, faint scrape, like thread being pulled through fabric. Coraline could still feel the cold from the mirror on her skin, even after she stepped away. The shapes of the children haunted her eyes, pale faces, button stares, silent mouths forming desperate words. Her chest rose and fell too quickly. She whispered into the hallway, though no one was there to hear. What happened to them? The shadows along the floor stirred faintly, as if shifting closer. Then a voice slipped into the stillness. "Now you see." Coraline spun. The cat sat on the banister, tail curled neatly around its paws, green eyes glinting in the weak light. "You knew," Coraline said, her voice shaking. "Those children, in the mirror, she did that to them, didn't she?" The cat leapt down gracefully, padding across the floor. "She did worse. They were like you once, curious, wandering. She gave them sweet food, soft beds, promises. And when they stayed, its whiskers twitched, and it lowered its voice to almost a whisper. She took what she wanted. Their eyes, their souls." Coraline's stomach lurched. She sewed buttons into them. The cat's gaze was steady, unreadable. "Yes, now they are hers forever, caught in the cracks of this place. Not alive, not gone, just shadows." Coraline thought of their pale hands pressed to the glass, their mouths shaping that one word. "Help." Her fists clenched. "That's why they showed themselves to me. They want out." The cat tilted its head, almost like a nod. "Perhaps. But escaping her web is not so simple." Behind them, the shadows along the walls quivered, dark and restless. Coraline looked toward the mirror again, but it was ordinary now, reflecting only her frightened face. The cat's tail flicked. "Be careful where you look, Coraline. Mirrors, corners, shadows, she uses them all. And once her buttons are fixed upon you..." It leaned closer, its green eyes burning brighter. "It is very hard to look away." The silence swallowed the words. Coraline hugged her arms to her chest, the weight of the mirror's memory pressing heavy in her mind. She had seen the children. She had seen what the other mother could do. And now the shadow seemed to breathe, waiting for her next step. The house was restless. Coraline could feel it in her bones. Every hallway carried a hush too thick. Every corner breathed with shadows that shifted when she passed. Yet this time, instead of turning back, she pressed on. She carried a small lamp she had found in the kitchen. Its light was faint, barely enough to touch the wall, but it was better than nothing. The flame wavered when she walked, throwing shapes that seemed to stretch and curl like fingers. She whispered to herself, steadying her breath. They're only shadows, only shapes. But the shadows moved with her, not chasing, not lunging, guiding. When she reached a fork in the hallway, the shadows along one path seemed to deepen, thickening like smoke, as though urging her away. The other path glimmered faintly, lighter, as though opening. She followed the lighter way. Step by step, the house unfolded before her, stranger than it had been before. The wallpaper patterns twisted when she looked too long, curling into spirals that almost formed faces. The floor creaked softly beneath her feet, though she walked as gently as she could. Then at the far end of a narrow corridor, she found a door. It was smaller than the others, almost hidden, its edges crooked as if it had been patched into the wall. Unlike the bright doors of the other house, this one was dull and gray, its paint chipped, its handle cold to the touch. Coraline raised the lamp, her hand trembling. The shadows crowded closer, pressing against the floorboards, stretching across the ceiling. Not menacing this time, but waiting, expectant. She swallowed hard and whispered, "What's behind here?" The lamp's light flickered. In its glow, she thought she saw faint scratches around the handle, like desperate little hands had clawed at the door, trying to get out. Her skin prickled. The cat's warning echoed in her mind. She uses the corners, the mirrors, the shadows. And yet Coraline could not turn away. She pressed her palm to the handle. The metal was icy. For a moment she thought she heard them again, faint voices, soft as breath against glass. Help. The shadows curled tighter around her feet. Coraline's hand hovered on the handle. The cold sank into her skin, sharp and biting, as though the metal itself did not want to be touched. The shadows pressed closer, pooling around her feet, their weight heavy and silent. She drew in a shaky breath and turned it. The door creaked open slowly, its hinges groaning like a whisper dragged from a throat unused to sound. Behind it was darkness, thick, suffocating darkness, like a curtain pulled too tightly. Her lamp's faint glow barely touched it, as if the light itself was afraid to enter. Still, Coraline stepped forward. Her eyes adjusted slowly. At first she thought she saw nothing at all, but then shapes emerged, small, pale, drifting in the blackness like forgotten moths. Children. They hovered in the dark, faces gaunt, their button eyes glimmering faintly in the lamplight. Their mouths did not open, yet Coraline felt the words inside her chest, vibrating softly against her ribs. Help us. Her throat closed. She wanted to speak, to promise, but her voice would not come. She raised the lamp higher, and the children shifted, their pale hands stretching toward her, though they could not cross the threshold. Behind them, something moved. A shadow larger than the rest, long and sharp, with arms that stretched too far, fingers curling like threads being pulled. Its shape rippled, not solid, not human, yet unmistakably hers. The other mother. Coraline stumbled back, the lamp flickering wildly. The children's faces blurred as the darkness swelled, pushing against the frame of the door as though it might burst through. She slammed it shut, her palms slick with sweat. The shadows around her scattered, slithering back into the cracks of the walls. For a moment, silence reigned again. Coraline pressed her forehead against the wood, her chest heaving. She had seen them. She had seen the children trapped, their button eyes pleading, and she had felt the presence behind them, watching, waiting, patient. The other mother knew she had looked. And Coraline knew with a sinking chill that the house was no longer pretending to be safe. The house had quieted again, but Coraline could not shake the memory of what she'd seen behind the hidden door. Pale faces, button eyes, the stretching shadow that reached toward her. She wandered into the garden, seeking air that did not feel so heavy. The flowers still glowed faintly, but their colors seemed dimmer now, as though the night itself had stolen some of their brightness. On the stone wall sat the cat. It licked its paw lazily, as though nothing in the world could trouble it, then looked up with those sharp green eyes that cut through every illusion of the other world. "You've been exploring again," the cat said, its voice sliding through the air like silk. Coraline crossed her arms. "I saw them, the children, behind the door. She's keeping them there." The cat's tail flicked. "Of course she is. She collects, like a spider in her web." Coraline sat heavily on the grass. "Why? Why does she want them? Why does she want me?" The cat tilted its head, eyes narrowing slightly. "She feeds on them. On you. Not in the way you imagine. Perhaps not with teeth and claws. But she feeds on what makes you real. Your love, your hope, your soul." Coraline shivered. The night air felt colder now, sharper against her skin. The cat leapt down from the wall and paced slowly in front of her. She lures children with sweetness and comfort, with what they think they want, and when they agree. Its whiskers twitched and it leaned close, eyes glinting. She sews the buttons. And once the buttons are there, they are hers forever. Coraline clenched her fists. "I'll never let her sew buttons into me." The cat purred softly, though the sound was not comforting. Brave words. But the other mother is clever. She waits. She tempts. And she always believes children will say yes in the end. The garden flowers rustled, though there was no wind. The shadows between the stems thickened, curling like threads. The cat sat back on its haunches, green eyes never leaving Coraline. "You must remember this. She is patient, and patience makes her dangerous." Coraline swallowed hard. The buttons of the trapped children flashed in her memory, and the weight of the warning settled heavy in her chest. The cat stretched across the grass, its sleek body arching like a shadow come to life. Its green eyes glowed as it fixed Coraline with a gaze that was too steady, too knowing. "You look frightened," it said softly. Coraline lifted her chin. "Of course I'm frightened. I saw what she's done. I saw what she wants." The cat's tail flicked in amusement. "Fear is useful, if you don't let it hold the leash." Coraline frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" The cat patted a slow circle around her, its paws silent against the earth. The other mother loves obedience. She thrives when children give in. Every yes makes her stronger. Every little surrender ties the thread tighter. Coraline hugged her knees. "So I just have to keep saying no." The cat paused, sitting neatly before her. "No alone is not enough. She will twist it. She will find ways to make no sound foolish, selfish, or unkind. She will offer you what you crave most, wrapped in sweetness you can barely refuse." The words sank into Coraline like stones. She thought of her parents at home, too busy, too distracted, always rushing. She thought of the other mother's perfect meals, her warm smiles, her way of making the world bend to Coraline's wishes. The cat seemed to read her thoughts. "She knows what you long for. That is her strength. But you must remember, everything she gives is hollow. A toy stuffed with dust. A flower made of paper. It shines until it falls apart, Coraline whispered. And the children? The cat's voice lowered almost to a growl. They said yes. That is why their voices are faint, their faces dim. They surrendered, and now they are trapped in the seams of her whirl. Neither alive nor dead, just hers. The night air grew heavier, pressing close. From the corners of the garden, the shadows seemed to listen. Coraline met the cat's glowing eyes. So how do I stop her? The cat blinked slowly, as though weighing whether to answer. Then it leaned close, its whiskers brushing against Coraline's cheek. You stop her by seeing the truth she hides, by looking where others turn away. She hates sharp eyes, Coraline. Use yours well. It pulled back, tail curling. And remember, she is patient. But patience can be broken. The cat's green eyes lingered, and then it slipped into the shadows, vanishing as though it had never been there at all. Coraline sat alone in the garden, her heart heavy with the riddle. Use your eyes, see the truth. But she could still feel the weight of the buttons pressing at the edges of her mind, waiting for her to slip. The house loomed quiet when Coraline returned, but she felt different now. The cat's words clung to her. She hates sharp eyes. Use yours well. So she looked harder. The kitchen was as bright and perfect as ever, its counters gleaming, its cupboards filled with neat rows of jars. But when Coraline opened one, she found it empty. She checked another the same. Perfect labels, neat handwriting, but nothing inside. Her eyes narrowed. In the parlor, the other Miss Spink and Miss Forcible sat in their armchairs, knitting with cheerful chatter. Their voices sounded warm, lilting, but when Coraline watched closely, their lips didn't move with the words. The sound came anyway, like a recording playing from the walls. She backed away, her stomach tight. In the hallway, the wallpaper shifted when she blinked. The flowers in its pattern wilting and straightening again as though caught in a loop. Everywhere she looked, the cracks grew wider. The other father sat at his piano again, playing the same melody. But now she saw his fingers not striking the keys, but hovering just above them. The tune poured out anyway, steady, false. His button eyes stared at nothing, blank as glass. Coraline's breath quickened. Everything she gives is hollow, the cat had said. And now Coraline saw the truth of it, a world built from pieces, stitched together like fabric, empty beneath its shine. She turned into the drawing room and froze. The little door behind the wallpaper was there again. Closed this time, but pulsing faintly, as though something on the other side was breathing. She crept closer. Her hand brushed the edges of the doorframe. The wood was warm, too warm, as if it pulsed inside it. And faintly, almost hidden in the silence, came the sound. Thread sliding through fabric. Coraline stepped back, heart hammering. The kitchen lights glowed when Coraline stepped inside. The other mother was waiting, as though she had known Coraline would come. She stood at the stove, stirring something in a heavy pot. The smell was sweet, almost too sweet, like sugar melting until it burned. "Hungry, my darling?" she asked without turning. Her voice was soft, almost kind. "I've made your favorite." Coraline sat stiffly at the table. Her sharp eyes darted around the room, the steaming bowl set out. The bread basket filled to the brim, the pitcher glistening with cold milk. But the closer she looked, the more wrong it all seemed. The bread did not rise when she touched it. It crumbled into dust. The milk's surface didn't ripple, no matter how she moved the pitcher. The soup in her bowl steamed, but when she leaned close, it had no scent at all. She drew in a steadying breath. It's not real. The spoon in the other mother's hand stilled, Slowly she turned, her black buttons gleaming. "What was that, dear?" Coraline lifted her chin. Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. "The food, the house, the neighbors, none of it's real. It's just pretend. Empty." The other mother's smile stretched wide. Too wide. "Empty?" she repeated softly. She stepped closer, her long fingers brushing the back of Coraline's chair. "Does it feel empty? The warmth, the comfort, the love I give you, is that so hollow?" Coraline's fist clenched in her lap. "Yes," she whispered. "Because it doesn't last. Because it's not alive." For the first time, the other mother's smile faltered. The corners of her lips twitched, then froze, as if the mask she wore was struggling to hold. Her voice, still smooth, had an edge now, thin and sharp. "You are ungrateful, Coraline. Do you not see how hard I've worked to make this world for you? How much I've given?" Coraline's stomach twisted, but she didn't look away. "You didn't make it for me. You made it for yourself." The silence that followed was heavy. The lamps flickered, shadows thickening along the walls. The other mother's hand lingered too long on the chair before she drew it back. Her smile returned, but it was brittle now, stretched tight over something darker. "Well then," she said softly, almost a whisper, "we shall see, won't we?" Her button eyes gleamed colder than ever. The house had grown colder. Even the air seemed different, sharp and brittle, like glass ready to break. Coraline hurried up the stairs to her room, her heart thudding with the echo of the other mother's brittle smile. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it. That was when she heard the soft sound, a light thump on the windowsill. The cat. It slipped gracefully into the room, green eyes catching the faint glow of the lamp. For once it did not look amused. Its tail flicked back and forth, restless like a metronome keeping time. "You've angered her," the cat said. Coraline sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling. "I told her the truth. I had to." The cat padded closer, its whiskers twitching. "And now she knows you see her world for what it is. That makes you dangerous to her, and she does not like dangerous children." Coraline hugged her arms around herself. She smiled, but it wasn't real. It was like her face couldn't hold it anymore. The cat leapt onto the bed beside her. "Masks always crack when the truth is spoken. But you must be careful when the mask slips. She grows cruel. She will try harder now, press sharper. She will not wait much longer." Coraline looked at the cat, her voice small. "So what do I do?" The cat tilted its head, eyes narrowing as though measuring her courage. "You must keep looking. Keep noticing what she hides. Every illusion has a seam, every thread a weakness. Pull at them, and her world begins to unravel." Coraline nodded slowly, though her throat was tight. "And if I don't?" The cat's voice dropped low, a soft growl vibrating beneath its words. "Then she sews the buttons, and you will never see your world again." The silence in the room grew heavy. Coraline could almost hear the faint sound of thread sliding through the fabric again, though there was nothing there. The cat leaned closer, its eyes gleaming. "Remember, child, she believes she's already won. That is her flaw. Use it." Before Coraline could ask more, the cat leapt from the bed and vanished into the shadow at the corner of the room, leaving her alone with the echo of its warning. Coraline lay back against the pillow, her eyes wide open in the dark. The air felt alive, pulsing with the other mother's unseen patience, waiting, watching. And she knew the cat was right. The game was changing. The morning came too quickly, or at least what this world called morning. The sun glowed pale through the window, but its warmth never touched Coraline's skin. When she came downstairs, the other mother was waiting at the table. No cooking this time. No bowls of steaming food. Just a tall glass of milk, perfectly white, and a plate with 2 slices of golden buttered toast. And beside them, a photograph. Coraline froze. It was her parents. Her real parents. Smiling in the kitchen back home, their arms around each other, flour dusting her father's shirt, her mother's hair caught in the light, her throat closed. And the other mother's black button eyes gleamed as she slid the picture closer. "I thought you might miss them, dear. I've kept this just for you." Coraline sat slowly. Her fingers twitched toward the photo, aching to touch it, to know it was real. The other mother's smile curved, soft and almost tender. "You can see them any time you like. You can have them with you always, safe, warm, happy. No more loneliness. No more wishing." Her long fingers brushed the frame. "All you need to do is say yes." Coraline's heart pounded. She remembered the cat's voice. "She will offer you what you crave most." She remembered the empty jars, the false voices, the crumbling bread. But this picture, this one felt different, real. Her hands curled into fists on her lap. The other mother leaned closer. "Yes, Coraline, that is all. A small word, a sweet word, and everything you want will be yours." The air around the table grew still, waiting. The milk on the table did not ripple. The butter on the toast did not melt. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. Coraline closed her eyes. Her voice came out a whisper. "No." The silence shattered. The photograph curled at the edges, blackening like paper in flame, until nothing remained but ash. The milk soured instantly. The toast crumbled into dust. And the other mother's smile snapped wide, sharp and furious, though her voice stayed soft. "Ungrateful child." Coraline trembled, but she lifted her chin. The cat was right. The mask was cracking. And if she could see the seams, maybe she could survive this game. Coraline stood at the back door, staring out at the garden. It had always been strange, bright flowers, curling vines, paths that twisted into shapes. But today, something about it felt different. When she stepped outside, the air was thick and heavy, like a sigh being held. The flowers leaned toward her, their petals opening wider, following her steps as though watching. The grass shivered, even though no wind stirred. She walked down the path, and the garden shifted under her feet. The stones rearranged themselves, forming patterns that seemed deliberate, symbols she didn't recognize. Behind her, the path she'd walked was no longer the same. It had folded into a different shape, closing her in. The garden breathed. Coraline could hear it, a slow inhale, the flowers swelling, the vines stretching upward, and then a long, low exhale as leaves fluttered in unison. Each breath made the air warmer, closer, as though the garden itself was alive and aware of her. She paused by a bed of roses. At first they were perfect, red and lush. But as she looked closer, the petals shimmered, shifting colors red to black, black to bone white before curling inward like mouths closing tight. A vine uncoiled near her ankle, brushing her shoe. She jerked back, heart pounding, but the vine only retreated slowly like a hand disappointed it couldn't hold her. From somewhere deep in the garden came a soft humming sound, low, rhythmic, like a lullaby sung through the earth. The melody was sweet at first, almost soothing, but the longer she listened, the more it felt wrong, as if it was meant to coax her into forgetting herself. Coraline's sharp eyes darted around. She remembered the cat's warning, "Use your eyes. See the truth she hides." And when she looked harder, she saw it. The garden wasn't just a garden, it was a map. Every twist of the path, every bloom of a flower was arranged to form a shape, a face. The other mother's face. Her button eyes glimmered in the pattern of dark stones, her sharp smile woven into the hedges. The entire garden was her image, alive and breathing, as if the earth itself bent to her will. Coraline stumbled back, her pulse racing. The garden exhaled again, long and slow, the petals trembling like laughter. And she knew then the world itself was watching her. Coraline stood frozen as the garden exhaled again, the flowers bowing low as if in reverence to something unseen. When she turned to retreat back to the house, the path was gone. In its place stretched a corridor of hedges, tall and dark, closing in like walls. Her breath caught. She hurried forward, her shoes crunching on gravel, but with each step the ground seemed to change. Stones rearranged themselves beneath her feet, twisting the path into new patterns. When she glanced over her shoulder, the way she'd come had already folded shut. The garden was shifting around her. Petals rustled with each breath, vines curling and uncoiling as though guiding her somewhere. The air smelled thick now, not of flowers but of damp soil, and something faintly metallic like rust. She quickened her pace, heart pounding. Left, right, another turn. Each path looked the same, yet each one seemed to pulse faintly, as if veins ran through the earth itself. She passed a row of daisies, their white faces lifting toward her. At first they looked harmless, but then the petals quivered. Mouths opening where centers should be, whispering in thin, rustling voices. Stay. 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 Coraline stumbled back, covering her ears, but the whispers slipped through, weaving like threads into her thoughts. She shook her head hard and ran. The hedges grew taller, the sky narrowing above her into a sliver. The humming beneath the soil returned, louder now, beating like a heart. At a crossroads, she stopped. The paths before her shifted, opening and closing like the inhale and exhale of some vast, unseen lung. She could not tell which was real, which would lead her back. Her knees trembled. And then she remembered the cat's warning. She hates sharp eyes. Use yours well. Coraline forced herself to look harder, to see. The left path gleamed faintly, too perfect, each stone laid in flawless order and illusion. The right path flickered, the flowers blurring like a painting drawn in haste. But the center path, cracked and crooked, looked imperfect and alive. She clenched her fists. "You can't trick me," she whispered, and stepped into the crooked way. The garden shivered as though displeased, the hedges groaning. Petals fell like rain, sharp as paper cuts, brushing her cheeks. But the path beneath her held. And somewhere, deep within the garden, the humming changed, not soothing now, but sharper, almost angry. The crooked path carried Coraline deeper into the garden, its stones uneven, roots pushing up through the cracks like fingers trying to catch her ankles. The air thickened. The humming beneath the soil grew softer again, weaving into a tune that tugged at her memory. It was almost like a lullaby she'd heard once, faint and comforting, though she couldn't remember where. And then came the voices. "Coraline." Her head whipped around. The sound was unmistakable, her mother's voice, warm and tired, the way it sounded at home when she called from the kitchen. "Coraline, come here, sweetheart. Dinner's ready." Her chest ached. She turned a corner, and there, at the far end of the path, stood her mother. She wore her familiar clothes, her hair tied back, her smile soft. She held out a hand. "Come with me," the figure said gently. "Let's go home." Coraline's feet shifted before she caught herself, her sharp eyes narrowed. The figure's hand was too long, its fingers bent in strange angles. And when she looked closely, the eyes were not her mother's eyes at all. They were buttons, black and gleaming. Coraline's stomach turned. She stumbled back, and the illusion flickered. For a moment, the face collapsed into petals and vines before reshaping again, this time into her father. His familiar glasses glinted, his voice warm. "Coraline," he said softly, "don't be afraid. I'll take you back." Her throat tightened. "You're not him," she whispered. The figure tilted its head. "Of course I am." "No," Coraline said louder, her fists clenched. "You're just more of her tricks. My real parents don't have buttons." The illusion froze, its smile stretching too wide. Then it crumbled, the body falling apart into a heap of dead leaves that scattered across the path. The garden shuddered around her, vines twisting angrily. The humming rose sharp and discordant, like a broken chord on a piano. Coraline pressed forward, teeth clenched. "You can't fool me. Not with them. Not ever." But as she walked, the air grew heavier, and she could feel the garden gathering itself, preparing another trick. The path narrowed as Coraline pressed forward, the crooked stones tilting under her shoes. The humming in the soil deepened, a heavy pulse that made the ground tremble. The garden was no longer pretending to be gentle. A vine slithered across the path ahead, thick as a rope. When Coraline tried to step over it, it snapped upward, wrapping around her ankle. She gasped and kicked, stumbling backward. The vine coiled tighter, its surface rough like braided twine, but alive, pulsing with a faint rhythm. She yanked hard, scraping her heel against the stones until the vine loosened. With a cry, she tore free and stumbled forward. But the garden was waking. The hedges leaned inward, branches snapping like jaws. Flowers turned their heads toward her, their petals folding inward until they resembled mouths, rows of pale teeth glistening with dew. Vines uncoiled in waves, curling across the path, reaching for her arms, her waist, her legs. They wrapped around her wrist, tugging hard, pulling her toward the hedges. Coraline struggled, her breath coming fast. The garden smelled thick and suffocating. Not of flowers anymore, but of damp stone and rot. She twisted, clawing at the vine, but for every strand she tore loose, two more reached for her. The cat's voice echoed in her memory. "Every illusion has a seam, every thread a weakness. Pull at them." Her sharp eyes darted across the path. The vines closest to her were taut, stretched thin from the ground to the hedge. She yanked one hard where it crossed a crack in the stones. It snapped with a shrill hiss, and the others recoiled as though stung. The garden shuddered. The humming skipped a beat. Coraline gasped, seizing the chance. She ripped through another vine and another until the path ahead shook loose, the hedges groaning as though in pain. The vines retreated slightly, curling back into the earth, though she could feel them waiting, watching, ready to strike again. Her chest heaved as she ran forward, shoes slipping on the uneven stones. Behind her, the hedges slammed shut, sealing the path she had escaped. The garden exhaled long and low, and the sound of its breath followed her like laughter. The crooked path finally opened into a clearing. Coraline stumbled to a stop, chest heaving, her shoes scuffed and her hands scratched raw from tearing at the vines. For the first time since she'd entered the maze, the garden fell silent. The clearing was circular, its grass glowing faintly. Pulsing with each breath the earth seemed to take. In the center grew a tree. At first, Coraline thought it was beautiful. Its trunk rose tall and twisting, its bark glistening like polished wood. The branches spread wide, heavy with flowers that glowed in soft colors, blues, pinks, silvers, golds. They shimmered like lanterns, lighting the clearing in gentle hues. But then Coraline looked closer. The blossoms weren't blossoms at all. They were faces. Dozens of Pale faces bloomed from the branches, each with button eyes sewn tight, their mouths frozen in faint, lifeless smiles. Their skin was thin and papery, fluttering with each slow breath of the garden. Coraline's stomach lurched. She stepped back, covering her mouth. The tree sighed. A low creak echoed through the clearing, its branches shuddering as though it had been waiting for her. The faces trembled in unison, and a sound escaped, faint, broken whispers layered atop one another. "Help us! Help us!" Coraline's legs went weak. These weren't just illusions, she could feel it. The tree held something real, something trapped. She forced herself to step closer, her eyes scanning the roots. They were thick and knotted, twisting deep into the ground, pulsing faintly like veins. At their base, carved into the bark, was a seam, a stitch of black thread holding part of the trunk together. The cat's warning echoed in her memory. Every illusion has a seam, every thread a weakness. Her heart pounded. If she pulled that thread, what would happen? The faces rustled again, button eyes glinting in the glow. "Please." Coraline's hand trembled as she reached toward the seam. The bark felt warm beneath her fingertips, pulsing like skin. The thread was rough, biting into her fingers. She pulled. The tree groaned, its branches rattling violently. The faces wailed, their button eyes flickering like candle flames. The garden shuddered, vines whipping at the edges of the clearing as though trying to stop her. But Coraline didn't let go. She pulled again, the thread loosening, unraveling stitch by stitch. A crack split down the trunk, glowing from within. For a moment, Coraline thought she saw something inside. Not wood, not roots, but a pale light straining to break free. The ground shook beneath her feet. The garden inhaled sharply, the breath rattling like anger, and then exhaled in a roar that sent petals swirling through the air. Coraline stumbled back, the loose thread clutched in her fist. The tree stood trembling, the seam torn open, the light within still glowing faintly. And she knew then she had wounded the garden. But the garden was far from done with her. The garden roared, not with a sound any human throat could make, but with the shaking of earth and the thrashing of branches. The tree in the center shuddered, its glowing faces shrieking in unison, their voices echoing into the night. Vines shot from the ground, no longer creeping but lashing like whips. One coiled around Coraline's wrist, another around her waist, yanking her off her feet. She hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from her chest. The seam she had torn glowed brighter now, spilling a pale light into the clearing. The vines writhed furiously, trying to shield it, to sew it shut again. Coraline clawed at the vine around her wrist, her fingernails scraping raw against its rough surface. It pulled tighter, dragging her toward the tree's roots, toward the pulsing light beneath the bark. "No," she gasped, twisting, kicking against the stones. Her shoe struck one of the roots, and for a moment, the vine faltered, its grip loosening just slightly. Her sharp eyes darted to the base of the tree. Another seam, smaller, hidden beneath the roots, the thread glinting faintly in the glow. She lunged forward, ignoring the pain burning across her wrist, and grabbed the thread. With a desperate pull, she yanked it free. The tree wailed. The light inside blazed, flooding the clearing in a blinding glow. The vines recoiled, thrashing wildly, then slackened all at once, dropping Coraline back onto the ground. She scrambled to her feet, clutching both loose threads in her fists. Her chest heaved, her legs trembling, but she ran before the garden could gather itself again. The crooked path reshaped beneath her, stones pushing her forward. The hedges leaned back, groaning, parting just enough to let her slip through. She sprinted until the house came into view, its looming windows glowing faintly against the night. Only when she slammed the back door shut behind her did she allow herself to collapse against it, gasping for air. The garden's roar still echoed faintly in her ears. She opened her hand. The black threads lay curled in her palm, warm and twitching as though still alive. She had pulled at the seams. She had wounded the garden. But she knew now with a sinking certainty, this world was stitched together everywhere. Every seam she found was another piece of the other mother's trap. And the more she pulled, the angrier it would become. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Coraline sat on her bed. The loose black threads from the garden still curled in her palm. They no longer twitched, but they felt heavy as if they remembered where they'd come from. She was almost asleep when the air shifted. The lamp dimmed, its glow shrinking to a pale halo. A chill crept into the room, brushing her skin like cold fingertips. And then whispers. Soft at first, like the rustling of paper, then clearer. Coraline. She bolted upright. The mirror on the far wall shimmered faintly, the surface rippling like water. Shapes flickered, their pale outlines of faces blurred and thin, as though pressed against the glass from the other side. Children. Their button eyes glimmered faintly, but not with the sharp, cruel gleam of the other mother's creations. These were dimmer, softer, sorrowful. Coraline stepped closer, her throat tight. "Who are you?" One of the faces leaned nearer to the glass. Its voice, though faint, slipped into her chest like a thread pulling at her heart. "We were like you once. Children who wandered. Children who said yes." Coraline shivered. You're the ones trapped behind the door." The whispers wove together, many voices layered into one. "Yes, she stitched us into her world. Took what we had. Left only shadows of what we were." The faces shifted, and Coraline saw glimpses of a girl with braids clutching a doll. A boy with crooked glasses, another child holding a toy soldier. Their forms flickered, fragile, as though they might crumble away if she looked too long. Coraline pressed her hand to the glass. "Can you get out? Can I help you?" The children's whispers stirred the air. The key, the door, the game she plays. She keeps us bound in buttons and thread, but you are not hers yet. Her heart thudded. "Tell me what to do." The mirror flickered violently, the children's faces fading in and out. Their voices overlapped, desperate. "Find the truth. Pull the threads. Free the souls. Or she will sew yours shut, too." The glass shuddered, a crack streaking across its surface. Coraline stumbled back, gasping. The room plunged into silence once more. But she wasn't alone. She could still feel them, faint and fragile, pressing against the edges of the world. The ghostly children had spoken, and their warning was clear. The cracked mirror shimmered again that night. Coraline sat upright in bed, her eyes fixed on it, waiting. The children's faces returned pale and flickering, button eyes dull and dim. But this time, one figure pressed closer than the others. A girl, no older than Coraline, with two thin braids and a dress that seemed to float around her like smoke. Her button eyes glimmered faintly, but when she spoke, her voice was small and trembling. "I was the first," she whispered. Coraline leaned forward. "The first what?" "The first she stitched." The girl's story unfolded in broken pieces, her words carrying the weight of long years. "I lived in this house long ago. My mother was kind, but always busy. I wandered the halls alone, wishing for a place where someone would listen, where where I mattered. That's when she came, the woman with the smile. She promised me a world of friends, a world where I would never be lonely. Coraline's hands tightened in her lap. The girl's voice shook. She gave me sweets. She showed me a garden that sang. She called herself my other mother, and her voice was so soft, so kind. I believed her. The girl's face wavered, as if the memory itself hurt. And then she asked me to stay forever. She said all I needed to do was sew on the buttons. Just button. So small, she said. I wanted to be loved, so I agreed. But when the needle touched my skin, her smile stretched too wide. And I knew I had been tricked. The girl's hands lifted, clutching the sides of her face, though she had no true body anymore. I screamed, but it was too late. The buttons were sewn. My eyes, my soul, she took them both. She left only this shell, trapped here in her world, forever hungry, forever hers. Coraline's throat ached. I'm so sorry. The girl's head tilted, her braids floating like strands of mist. Don't be sorry, be strong. She will offer you the same. She will tempt you with what you long for most, but the price is always the same. Once the needle touches, you are hers. The glass rippled violently, the other children's voices rising in a whispering chorus. Beware her promises, beware her smile. And then the mirror fell still, leaving Coraline staring at her own wide, frightened eyes reflected back at her. The next night, the air grew heavy again. Coraline sat waiting, her lamp dimmed to a soft glow, her eyes fixed on the cracked mirror. The children returned faint shapes, blurred edges, button eyes dull like dark beads. This time, a boy's face pressed forward. He looked a little older than Coraline, with crooked glasses perched on his nose, though they seemed faded and ghost-like now. His voice was quiet, brittle like old paper. She found me in the rain, he whispered. I was cold and alone. My parents worked in the city. They were gone often, and I walked the fields with no one to speak to. That's when I saw her, the other mother. She said she had a place where the sun always shone, where I would never shiver again. The boy's eyes lowered. She gave me books full of stories where I was the hero. She clapped when I read aloud. She told me I was clever, braver than anyone else. For once, I felt seen. Coraline's chest tightened. But one day, she said, if you want to be clever forever, if you want to keep my stories always, you must stay. The boy's voice cracked. I said yes. I was foolish. I thought she meant books, warmth, the family. But what she meant was buttons. His trembling hand lifted, and Coraline saw the faint glimmer of thread crossing where his eyes once were. The needle hurt, but worse was the silence that followed. The stories stopped. Her claps fell quiet. Her smile no longer reached her face. I realized I was not her child. I was her prize. The boy leaned close to the glass, his voice a thin rasp. She feeds on us, not with teeth, but with love twisted into chains. We are stitched here to keep her world alive. Every laugh, every dream she gives is only bait. Once you say yes, she unravels you thread by thread until nothing of you remains. Coraline's hands shook as she whispered, she won't have me. Not ever. The boy's pale face flickered, fading back into the mist with the others. Then be wise, little girl. Be braver than I was. Pull at the seams before she sews you shut. The mirror darkened, leaving Coraline staring at her own reflection, her heart pounding like a drum. The cracked mirror quivered once more. Coraline sat cross-legged on her bed, her hands gripping the black thread she had pulled from the garden, her breath shallow. The pale faces swirled in the glass, then one leaned closer than the rest. A younger child, this time a small boy, with round cheeks and a faint smile that didn't quite belong to him anymore. His button eyes flickered faintly as though dim candles sat behind them. His voice was softer, almost playful, but heavy with sorrow. She found me on the playground. Coraline leaned in, listening. I loved to play games, hide and seek, tag, races. But the other children didn't always want me around. I was too little, too slow. Then one day, she appeared. The other mother. She said she loved games more than anything. She said she had a world where the games never ended, where I would always win. The boy's faint smile wavered. She showed me a circus, bright tents, shining lights, animals that bow when I entered. Everyone clapped for me. Everyone cheered when I ran. For once, I wasn't too slow. I was the best. Coraline's stomach twisted. But games end, the boy whispered. And when I asked for another round, she told me the rules had changed. She held up the needle and thread and said, if I wanted to keep playing forever, I must sew the buttons. Winners wear their prizes, she told me, and I believed her. His button eyes dimmed, his smile finally gone. When the stitches were done, the clapping stopped. The circus fell silent. The lights burned out. And I realized I was no player. I was her toy. Coraline's heart sank. She tricked you. All of you. The boy nodded faintly, his form flickering. She always tricks. With sweets, with stories, with laughter. Whatever you most wish for, she offers. And when you reach for it, the needle is waiting. The voices of the other children rose softly behind him, a chorus of whispers threading together. Remember, Coraline, she cannot give without taking. Every gift is a chain. Every smile hides a stitch. The mirror shivered, and the children's faces dissolved once more into pale mist, leaving Coraline alone with her thoughts, and the cold dark pressing against the window. The mirror pulsed faintly into the dark, like a heart beating behind glass. Coraline sat upright in bed, her arms wrapped around her knees, her eyes fixed on the rippling surface. The children's pale shapes returned, drifting like smoke across the silver glass. Their button eyes shimmered weakly, their voices rising in a whispering chorus. But this time, Coraline did not wait for them to speak first. She pressed forward, her voice low but steady. Tell me how to free you. The whispers hushed. The mist in the mirror trembled as though the children had been waiting for those words. Slowly, the braided girl's face leaned forward again, her voice soft as a thread pulled through the fabric. She keeps us bound in hidden places, pieces of our souls, stitched into her world. Find them, and we may be free. The boy with glasses followed, his voice sharp but fragile. She hides them where her lies are strongest, in the places she wants you to believe. The seams, Coraline. Always the seams. The younger boy with the round cheeks appeared next, his voice thin and tired. Each piece is guarded. She will not let them go easily. But if you can see past her tricks, if you can pull the threads loose, the souls will return. Coraline's breath caught. How will I know where to look? Their voices wove together, eerie and soft. The garden, the mirror, the hollow places, the door. She builds her world like a web, and every web has a center. The braided girl's voice broke through, firmer now. But beware. For each soul you pull free, her hunger will grow. She will come closer. Her hands will reach for you in the dark. If she catches you, Coraline, you will join us. Coraline's fists clenched at her sides. Her heart pounded, but she lifted her chin. Then I won't let her catch me. I'll find your souls. I'll pull every thread until she has nothing left." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then the children's voices rose together like a sigh of wind through hollow branches. "Brave girl. Brave, clever girl." The mirror glowed softly, almost like a smile. Then the light faded, the faces drifting back into mist until the glass showed only Coraline's reflection once more. She sat in the dark, her breath steadying, her fists still tight. She was afraid, but she was also certain there was a way to fight, and she would find it. The night was long, but Coraline did not sleep. The whispers of the ghostly children lingered in her ears, threading through her thoughts like strands of cold silk. Find the seams, pull the threads, free the souls. At last, she rose from her bed, clutching the 2 black stitches she had taken from the garden. They pulsed faintly in her palm, as though still alive. The mirror was quiet now, but the air in the room felt heavy, filled with unseen eyes. Coraline whispered into the silence, "Show me where to go." And then faintly, almost too soft to hear the braided girl's voice, drifted back. "Follow the hush. It will lead you." Coraline tiptoed down the hall, her bare feet brushing against the cold wooden floor. The house seemed different in the dark, its wallpaper breathing faintly, its shadow stretching like long, crooked fingers. The hush was there, a strange quiet, pulling her toward the far end of the hall. She paused before the mirror again, but this time its cracked surface showed nothing. Still, the silence tugged at her, urging her downward. She followed. The stairs groaned beneath her weight, the banister smooth but cold beneath her hand. The air thickened as she reached the parlor. The hush grew heavier, almost a pressure in her ears. There, in the far corner of the room, something shimmered faintly against the wallpaper. A seam. Her heart leapt. It was small, almost invisible, unless the light caught it just so. A thin black thread looped tightly, holding shut something beneath the wall. She approached slowly, her breath shallow. The thread twitched as she neared, as though aware of her. Her fingers hovered just above it. The whispers rose again, soft and urgent. "Pull it, Coraline. Pull, and you will see." She grasped the seam and yanked. The wallpaper shuddered, curling outward like skin peeling away. Behind it, the faint glow of pale light spilled into the room. She gasped. Inside the hollow wall, faint and fragile, floated a small object no bigger than a marble. It pulsed with a dim warmth, like a heartbeat trapped in glass. One of the souls. Coraline reached in and grabbed it. The light burned cold in her hand, but she held on tightly. The house groaned. The floorboards trembled. Somewhere deep in the walls, she heard it. The sound of claws scraping against wood, and a voice like silk stretched too thin. "A little thief!" Coraline's blood ran cold. She shoved the glowing soul into her pocket and stumbled back, her fists clenched. The house trembled again, but then fell silent. The whispers returned, faint but filled with hope. "One is freed. 3 remain." Coraline exhaled, her body shaking, but a spark of triumph flickered in her chest. She had begun, and she would not stop. The house was restless. The floorboards creaked with every step, though Coraline knew she was the only one awake. The shadows twitched along the walls, bending into shapes that stretched too long, lingered too close. She held the small, glowing soul tight in her pocket, the whispers of the ghostly children still echoing in her ears. "One is freed. 3 remain." But something else stirred inside the house, something that wasn't a whisper. Her eyes drifted to the tiny door in the drawing room, the one she had opened once before, the one that led into the stitched world. It was shut now, but a faint glow pulsed at its edges like a heartbeat waiting for her hand. And then, lying in the dust beside it, she saw it. A key. At first it looked ordinary, long, iron, old, but as Coraline lifted it, she felt its weight. Too heavy for such a small piece of metal. Its teeth shimmered faintly, sharp and crooked, like the grin of something alive. The moment her fingers closed around it, the house reacted. The wallpaper rippled, seams quivering like wounds reopening. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to watch. Coraline's pulse quickened. She knew this wasn't an ordinary key. This was the key, the one that could open the tiny door, and perhaps more than that. A whisper brushed her ear. Not the children this time, but a darker voice. Every lock has a secret. Every door has a truth. But truth cuts as deep as lies, little girl. Coraline clenched the key tighter, her jaw set. She could feel its edges pressing into her palm, almost sharp enough to draw blood. She stepped back, staring at the tiny door. The glow at its edges pulsed brighter now, as if responding to the key's presence. Her breath caught. This key didn't just unlock doors, it woke them. And the house was full of locked places. The iron key was warm in her hand, its teeth glinting faintly into the dim light. Coraline stood in the drawing room, staring at the tiny door hidden in the wall. Her heart thudded. The key seemed to hum faintly, as though urging her forward. She crouched, slid the key into the lock, and turned it. Click. The door groaned. Its edges glowed brighter, the seams stretching like a wound torn open. Slowly, the door swung outward, revealing only blackness on the other side. Coraline leaned closer, the key still clutched tight. The darkness inside wasn't empty, it pulsed faintly, like ink swirling in water. A cold breath seeped out, brushing against her face. And then, whispers. Not the children's soft pleas, but sharp, broken murmurs, hundreds layered over each other, voices pulling at her mind. Hungry. Waiting. Come inside. Stay forever. Coraline staggered back, slamming the door shut. Her hands shook, but the key remained steady in her grasp, as though it had wanted her to see. Her sharp eyes flicked around the room. There were other doors. A tall cabinet with brass handles in the corner, a narrow cupboard under the stairs, even the locked trunks that had sat untouched in the hallway. She tested the key again, this time on the cabinet. The lock gave way instantly. Inside, instead of shelves, stretched a tunnel of fabric walls stitched with rough thread, buttons scattered across the seams like watchful eyes. The tunnel pulsed faintly, as though alive. Coraline slammed the cabinet shut, her breath quick and shallow. The key was powerful, yes, but not every secret it unlocked was meant for her. She tucked it into her pocket, gripping it beside the small glowing soul she had already found. Two objects, different weights, but both alive in their own way. Her thoughts burned with a single realization. This key could open every hidden place, every seam the other mother had sewn shut. It could free the children's souls. But it could also set loose things far darker. The iron key weighed heavily in Coraline's pocket, pressing against the glowing marble of the first freed soul. The two objects seemed to whisper against each other, one warm with hope, the other cold with secrets. The ghostly children's voices stirred faintly in her ears. Another waits, another cries in silence. Seek the seams, Coraline. Pull the threads. She lit a small candle and walked the hallway slowly. Every door she passed seemed to tremble, as if aware of the keys she carried. At the far end of the corridor, she stopped at a door she had never dared open before. It was tall and thin, its wood cracked with age, its handle rusted. The seam around it quivered faintly, black thread stretched too tight, straining to keep it shut. Her hand shook as she slid the key into the lock. Click. The threads snapped one by one, curling back into the wood like burned hair. The door swung open. Behind it was not a room, but a long, narrow hall stitched from fabric, its walls patterned with faded wallpaper sewn together in uneven squares. At the far end, something glowed faintly pale, fragile, like a star hidden in fog. One of the souls. Coraline stepped inside. Her candle flickered, the shadows along the fabric walls writhing like snakes. She walked carefully, eyes fixed on the glow ahead. Halfway down the hall, she heard it. Coraline. She froze. The voice was warm, familiar. She turned, and there stood her real mother. Not the button-eyed one, not a trick. Her mother as she remembered her. Tired eyes, gentle hands, that weary smile. Coraline, her mother said softly, come here. You don't need to be afraid anymore. I'll take you home. Coraline's throat tightened. She wanted to believe it. Every part of her ached to run forward, to be held. But then she noticed it. Her mother's shadow didn't match. While the figure reached toward her, the shadow on the stitched wall stayed perfectly still. Her chest burned. You're not her. The figure's smile twisted, its lips stretching too wide, its hands bent at wrong angles, fingers lengthening like claws. The illusion melted, unraveling into strands of black thread that writhed across the walls. The soul's glow flickered at the end of the hall, nearly swallowed by the shadows. Coraline ran. The threads lashed at her legs, her arms, her hair, trying to pull her back. She clutched the iron key tight, swinging it like a blade. Wherever its teeth slashed, the threads shrieked and snapped, curling into smoke. At last she reached the glow, a second marble, pulsing faintly, its light dim but alive. She snatched it into her palm, holding it close. The hall shuddered, collapsing inward. The stitched walls unraveled, the door at the far end slamming shut behind her. Coraline stumbled back into the corridor, breath ragged, both glowing souls clutched to her chest. The whispers of the children rose again, soft and grateful. Two freed, to remain. But beneath their relief, Coraline heard something else, a low laugh, silky and sharp. The other mother knew. The corridor was silent except for Coraline's breath, shallow and fast, and the faint pulses of the two glowing souls in her hands. And then, the air shifted. A coldness crawled along the walls, curling into the corners, brushing her neck and shoulders. The shadows stretched, twisting until they formed a shape at the far end of the hallway. A tall figure emerged, smooth, elegant, perfect but impossible. The other mother, black button eyes gleaming, her long fingers resting lightly at her sides, a smile curved so unnaturally wide it seemed to slice the air. Brave little girl, she said softly, her voice silk stretched over steel. You have taken what is mine, two of my treasures, and yet you walk as if you are free. Do you not see? You could have so much more. Coraline's hands clenched the glowing souls, pressing them against her chest. Her voice shook but carried determination. I won't let you keep them. Not now. Not ever. The other mother laughed, low and musical, the sound filling the corridor like rolling glass. Ah, but you could. You could have everything your heart desires. Love, laughter, comfort. Even your real parents, if you say the right word. Coraline's stomach nodded. She thought of the illusions in the garden, the button-eyed figures pretending to be her parents, but she did not waver. "Your tricks won't work on me," she said. The other mother stepped closer, her shadow stretching unnaturally across the floor. "Tricks? No, little girl. These are offers. I am giving you a choice. Everything you want, I can give. Only you must stay. Say yes, and you will never want again." Coraline's fingers tightened around the key. Her heart pounded, but her sharp eyes swept the hallway. She saw the seams, the hidden threads running along the walls, the faint black lines that revealed where the other mother's illusions could be undone. "I will never say yes," she said, her voice firm. "Not to you, not to your lies." The other mother's smile froze for a moment, then it stretched wider, impossibly so. "Bold, clever, brave. But even the cleverest can be ensnared. You think you hold the key. But the key also holds me, and I will find a way to take what is mine." She lifted a hand, and the walls of the corridor trembled. The wallpaper bubbled, the floors shivered, and shadows leapt forward like living claws. Coraline held her ground, the two glowing souls pressed close, the iron key cold and heavy in her palm. The whispers of the ghostly children rose again, mingling with the hiss of the walls. "Pull the seams! Pull the threads! Stay strong!" The other mother's eyes gleamed. "Then let the game continue, little thief. Let us see how far your courage will carry you." And with that she dissolved into the shadows, leaving Coraline standing alone in the trembling corridor, but stronger than before. Coraline's hands were steady now, clutching the iron key and the two glowing souls. The whispers of the ghostly children hummed in her mind, guiding her through the dim halls. The third waits where laughter hides. She followed their advice, moving carefully through the house. At the end of the hall, she found a door she had never noticed before, a small, round porthole of a door, its brass handle gleaming faintly, seams stretched taut, as if holding back a secret. Sliding the key into the lock, she turned it slowly. Click. The door swung open, revealing a room filled with toys, dolls, spinning tops, blocks, and wind-up animals. Brightly colored and inviting, a soft giggle echoed through the air, playful, cheerful, almost comforting. But Coraline's sharp eyes scanned the room carefully. She noticed the toys' eyes buttons, tiny black gleaming buttons, and as she looked closer, the smiles on the dolls stretched unnaturally, fixed in frozen laughter. The giggle repeated, louder now. A small, pale child stepped from behind a stack of toys, a girl with ribbons in her hair, holding a jack-in-the-box. "Come play with me," she said, her button eyes shining. Coraline froze. She remembered the warnings. Every smile hides a stitch. Every offer is a trap. The jack-in-the-box twisted and wound itself, clicking like a heart. "You can stay here forever," the girl said. "We can laugh and play and never leave." Coraline's pulse raced, but she clenched the key in the souls. "I won't stay," she said firmly. "You are trapped here, and I will help you get out." The child's eyes flickered, her smile faltering. The toys around the room shivered, their button eyes glinting in the dim light. Coraline saw the seams. Threads ran beneath the floorboards, through the toys, holding the child in place. She knelt, carefully pulling at a thin black thread beneath the jack in the box. It resisted, snapping faintly, but she tugged harder. The thread unraveled, and the child's button eyes softened, glowing faintly with a warm, pale light. The girl laughed, real laughter this time, free and unbound, and the toys quieted, lifeless again. Coraline grabbed the glowing soul the girl left behind, tucking it safely with the other two. The room sighed, the air lighter. The whispers of the children rose in gratitude. 3 freed, 1 remains. But Coraline knew with a shiver that the other mother's cleverest traps were still ahead. The whispers of the ghostly children guided her once more. The last waits where fear hides, where promises are sweetest and lies most cruel. Coraline's hands were steady, though her chest pounded with dread. The 3 souls she had already freed glowed faintly in her pocket, pulsing like tiny hearts. The iron key felt heavy, almost alive, pressing against her palm as if urging her forward. At the far end of the hall, she found the final door. It was tall, ornate, carved with twisting vines and flowers. Its brass handle gleamed too brightly, almost hypnotic, and the seam around it hummed with energy. She slid the key into the lock, her fingers trembling slightly. Click. The door opened. Inside was a room bathed in golden light. At first, it seemed beautiful, warm, sunlit garden, stretching as far as the eye could see. Birds sang, a fountain gurgled, and in the center of the garden stood a small child, the last trapped soul. "Coraline!" the child called, running toward her with open arms. Coraline's heart leapt, but her sharp eyes noticed the thread. Black stitches ran along the child's arms and legs, almost invisible in the bright light. And the garden itself, it shimmered unnaturally, as though it were a painted illusion rather than real. A voice whispered behind her, silk, cold, impossibly smooth. "Say yes, little girl. Stay, and all will be yours. Free your heart from fear. Free your longing." The other mother materialized in the corner, smiling, flawless, her button eyes gleaming in the golden light. "All of this could be yours. Only stay. Only say yes." Coraline's chest burned. She clutched the iron key and the 3 glowing souls. "I won't say yes," she shouted. "You can't trick me again." The other mother's smile twisted. She raised a hand and the garden rippled violently. Flowers twisted into sharp shapes. The fountain hissed steam and the light flickered, threatening to snuff out the child's glow. Coraline knelt quickly, grabbing the faint threads holding the child. Her hands moved fast, pulling and tugging, careful not to let the other mother's magic wrap around her fingers. The threads snapped, unraveling into black smoke. The child blinked, real and alive, their pale glow warming and steadying in Coraline's hands. The garden shuddered. The other mother screamed, her voice sharp as broken glass. "No! My treasures! My world! They are mine!" Coraline backed away, the last soul safe, her hands clutching all 4. She turned and ran, the golden light of the garden flickering and shrinking behind her, the door slamming shut as she fled the other mother's reach. She burst into the hallway, chest heaving, the iron key still in her hand. The house was quiet once more. The whispers of the ghostly children rose in harmony, soft and joyful. All 4 freed, all safe, thanks to your courage. Coraline exhaled, feeling the weight of victory and relief. She knew the other mother would not stop trying, but for now, the children were free, and she held the key that could unlock every secret, if she dared to use it wisely. The walls of the stitched world trembled, dark shadows stretching long and twisted. Coraline clutched the iron key tightly in one hand, the 4 glowing souls secured in the other. The ground beneath her feet pulsed faintly, as if the world itself were alive and watching. The other mother appeared, her black button eyes gleaming, her smile sharp and impossibly wide. "You've taken everything," she hissed. "My treasures, my threads, and now you think you can leave?" Coraline's jaw set. "I'm leaving," she said firmly, "and I'm taking them with me." The other mother's laughter filled the air, low and sinister, as the walls of the stitched world began to twist and shift. Doors grew taller, corridors stretched endlessly, and shadows slithered along the floor like snakes. The air smelled of damp earth and thread, heavy and suffocating. Coraline's heart pounded, but she forced herself forward. The whispers of the freed children hummed in her ears, urging her onward. Run, Coraline. Stay clever. Stay brave. She raced through the warped corridors, the glow of the souls lighting her path. Shadows reached for her walls, trying to bend around her, but she used the key like a sword, pressing its teeth into the seams of the world. Wherever the key touched, threads snapped, unraveling the illusions around her. Behind her, the other mother's screams echoed, sharp and furious. You cannot escape me. I am everywhere. I am the world itself. Coraline ducked under a hanging vine, stitched from shadow, then leapt over a floorboard that twisted upward like a ramp. The glow of the four souls pulsed steadily, guiding her toward the faint light ahead, the tiny door she had first entered through. Her breath came in sharp gasps. The walls of the stitched world shook violently, as if the other mother were tearing the world apart to catch her. But Coraline did not falter. She sprinted, pressed the key into the final door's lock, and turned it. Click. The door swung open into the night air. The cool breeze brushed her face, carrying the scent of real grass, real earth, real light. The stitched world shrieked behind her, a sound of fury and frustration, as if it were alive and wounded. Coraline dove through the door, tumbling onto the ground outside. The stars above glimmered faintly, the moon casting a gentle silver glow. She rolled, scrambled to her feet, and held the four glowing souls close. Behind her, the tiny door sealed with a final snap, locking the stitched world away for now. The night was quiet. The house loomed in shadow, but it felt safer somehow. Coraline took a deep breath, the wind filling her lungs. She had escaped. She had been brave. She had been clever. And the ghostly children were free. For now, the night embraced her, gentle and still, a reward for courage and determination. The night was alive with quiet sounds, leaves rustling in the gentle wind, distant hoots of owls and the soft scurry of unseen creatures across the grass. Coraline's bare feet brushed against the cool earth as she ran, holding the four glowing souls close to her chest and the iron key clutched tight in one hand. The air smelled of freedom, but also carried a faint undertone of something she could not name, a lingering shadow that whispered just beyond hearing. The stitched world had been wounded, yes, but it was not gone. Coraline could feel it tugging at the edges of her mind, the memory of its dark threads, the echo of the other mother's laughter. She paused for a moment behind the tall fence at the edge of the yard, peering back at the house. Its windows were dark still and silent, but Coraline could almost imagine the faint glow of black-threaded seams beneath the walls. Her heart raced. She knew the other mother would try again somehow, some way. But she also knew something else. She held the key, and she held courage in her chest. The children were free because of her. The wind shifted, carrying a soft whisper. Well done, Coraline. It was the voices of the freed children, faint but warm, threading through the night air like silk. You were clever. You were brave. You did not falter. The seams have been pulled. The threads unraveled. We are free because of you. Coraline smiled faintly, kneeling to rest for a moment. The glowing souls pulsed softly in her hands, comforting her, letting her feel the lives she had saved. But she could not linger. The night was quiet, but shadows could linger in corners. The stitched world was clever and patient. It would not give up. Coraline rose and continued toward the edge of the forest, the wind brushing through her hair. The moonlight guided her path, silver and steady. Every step she took felt like a promise to the children, to herself, and to the courage she had discovered within. The key felt heavier in her pocket now, not as a weight, but as a reminder of power, of responsibility. Every lock she would face, every door she would encounter, would bow to the courage and cleverness she had already shown. And in the quiet of the night, Coraline understood, freedom was not a single act. It was the courage to face every shadow, every trap, every promise and lie, and to step forward anyway. The night stretched on, vast and gentle. Coraline moved through it like a whisper, a small figure holding immense light, carrying the souls of those who had been lost, and the certainty that she could keep moving, keep protecting, keep fighting for what was right. Coraline finally reached a small clearing beyond the edge of the forest. The grass was soft under her feet, and the silver light of the moon painted gentle patterns across the ground. She sank to the earth, leaning against a tree, her breath coming in shallow, uneven bursts. The 4 glowing souls rested safely in her lap, their light warm and reassuring. For a moment she allowed herself to close her eyes, to imagine safety, to imagine the stitched world gone forever. But even in the quiet, she felt a shiver along her spine, a faint pull at her chest, as if the shadows themselves had followed her into the night. The wind whispered, carrying the faintest trace of a voice, soft, sweet, dangerous. Coraline, you cannot hide. You cannot escape me. Her eyes snapped open. The clearing seemed empty, the moonlight calm and steady. And yet a tension lingered in the air, an invisible weight pressing against her skin. Coraline drew the glowing souls closer, feeling their warmth spread through her palms. She took a deep breath, letting the courage that had carried her so far fill her chest. "You won't trick me again," she whispered to the shadows. "Not now. Not ever." The whispers of the freed children rose faintly in response, like wind rustling through leaves. "You were clever. You were brave. You survived. But stay alert, some shadows never sleep." Coraline's fingers brushed the iron key in her pocket. It pulsed faintly as though alive, a reminder of the power and responsibility she now carried. Every lock she could open, every seam she could pull, was proof that she could face the dark and win. She leaned back against the tree, letting her mind wander, just enough to rest, just enough to gather strength for what might come next. The night stretched on, quiet and gentle, but she kept one sharp eye on the forest's edge where shadows twisted and murmured. For even though she had escaped the stitched world, the other mother was clever and patient. One day she might return, but Coraline knew this. She would be ready. Courage, cleverness, and the light of those she had freed would guide her. And no shadow, no trick, no promise of false safety could take that from her. The night was calm now, a gentle hush settling over the clearing. Coraline rose slowly, brushing the soft grass from her clothes, the glowing souls secured safely in her hands. The iron key weighed heavily in her pocket, a reminder of both the power she carried and the responsibility it demanded. She moved carefully through the forest, her bare feet pressing against the cool earth. Each step was deliberate. Each sound noted the whisper of leaves, the crack of twigs, the distant call of an owl. The stitched world had taught her that danger often hid in the smallest details, and she refused to be careless. As she walked, her mind wandered to the trials she had faced. The living garden, the illusions of her parents, the cunning tricks of the other mother. Each challenge had tested her courage and cleverness, But she had endured. She had freed the trapped souls, navigated twisted paths, and resisted temptation at every turn. A breeze brushed her face, carrying the faint scent of flowers from the real world, not the stitched illusions. Coraline breathed deeply, letting it fill her lungs. The real world felt fragile, precious, and wonderfully alive. I was brave, she thought, and I was clever. I can face shadows and lies and still keep my heart. The whispers of the freed children rose softly in her mind, like the echo of wind through trees. You did it, Coraline. You were strong. You are stronger than the other mother ever imagined. Coraline smiled faintly, the glow of the souls lighting her path. The moon hung high above, silver and steady, guiding her back toward her home. Even though the stitched world still lingered somewhere behind the walls, distant and dangerous, she knew something important. Courage was not just facing monsters or unraveling threads. Courage was moving forward step by step, even when fear pressed against you. With each careful step, the forest seemed to open before her, the shadows less threatening, the path more certain. The night was long, but Coraline had learned its rhythm. She had learned her own strength. And as the first hint of dawn brushed the horizon with pale gold, Coraline reached the edge of the forest. The familiar outline of her real home stood before her, quiet and ordinary, yet filled with a sense of safety she had almost forgotten. She held the glowing souls close and slipped the key safely into her pocket. The stitched world had tested her, but she had won. And now, with courage in her heart and the knowledge she could face the dark, she stepped forward into the real world, ready to rest, to heal, and to never forget the lessons of bravery she had earned in the night. Coraline stepped carefully through the front door of her home, the wooden frame familiar and comforting beneath her hands. The house was quiet, bathed in the soft golden glow of dawn filtering through the windows. Everything seemed ordinary, the ticking of clocks, the faint smell of wood and dust, and the gentle hum of morning life beginning. She placed the 4 glowing souls gently on her dresser, their light soft but steady. They pulsed faintly, a reminder of the lives she had saved and the courage she had shown. The iron key lay beside them, inert now, as if content to rest after its heavy work. Coraline sank onto her bed, the warmth of the real world filling her chest. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the events of the stitched world flow through her like a memory that was both frightening and empowering. The whispers of the children were faint but clear in her mind, like a gentle lullaby. You were brave, you were clever, you freed us, and you will always carry the courage you found here. She smiled softly, realizing that though the other mother had been cunning, and the stitched world full of shadows and lies, she had persevered. She had faced fear, resisted temptation, and uncovered hidden truths. Even as she rested, Coraline remained aware. Shadows might linger, doors might creak in corners, and the faint pull of the stitched world might call to her again. But she was ready. Every heartbeat, every breath reminded her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to face it. The sunlight grew stronger, spilling across her room and chasing away the last hints of darkness. Coraline lay back on her pillow, the glowing souls resting safely nearby, the key at her side. And though the house was quiet, though the stitched world was behind her for now, a small part of her could not help but wonder. What other secrets were hidden in the corners of the world? And if they appeared, would she be ready? With a deep, steadying breath, Coraline closed her eyes, letting sleep carry her gently into morning. The night had tested her. The stitched world had challenged her. But she had emerged stronger, braver, wiser, ready to face whatever came next, with her heart full of courage and wonder. The morning sun poured through Coraline's window, gentle and golden. The house was peaceful, every corner ordinary and safe. She sat on her bed, the four glowing souls resting nearby, their soft light flickering faintly like tiny, grateful heartbeats. The iron key lay beside them, cool and still, its work done for now. Coraline ran her fingers over its teeth, feeling the weight of responsibility and courage it represented. She thought back to the stitched world, the dark corridors, the clever tricks, the garden that moved and breathed, and the illusions that tried to fool her into surrendering. She remembered each shadow, each thread, and each challenge she had faced. And she realized something important. Courage was not just in daring acts, but in persistence, cleverness, and the quiet strength of the heart. The whispers of the children echoed faintly in her mind, warm and comforting. You freed us. You faced her. You held the light. We are safe because of you. Coraline smiled, feeling a gentle swell of pride. The night had been long and dangerous, but it had also shown her what she was truly capable of. She had faced fear, trickery, and temptation, and had emerged victorious. Even as she sat quietly, the soft glow of the souls nearby reminded her that vigilance and courage were ongoing. The other mother, clever and patient, might linger somewhere, but Coraline knew she could meet whatever came with a steady heart and sharp mind. She leaned back against her pillow, eyes tracing the morning light dancing across her room. Life outside the stitched world was ordinary, safe and beautiful. Yet in her mind she carried the lessons, the bravery and the magic of the adventure she had survived. Coraline closed her eyes, letting the quiet strength of morning wash over her. Sleep returned gently, soft and comforting, carrying her into a calm, untroubled rest. And in that quiet moment, the house, the souls, and Coraline herself all seemed to breathe together a harmony of courage, cleverness, and the quiet triumph of hearts who refused to give in to fear.